start off the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll start off if there's any comments from the public. Let's come up to the podium, identify yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sean Davey. Thank you for the courtesy. I'll try to be brief. It's not always my strong point, but I have a bunch of notes here to try to communicate effectively. I think you know I spoke at the planning board recently. I'm here today because I was astonished to hear what appeared to be a pre-conclusion from presumably the Wetlands Committee and the chair of the planning board that a 75-foot wetlands buffer is the appropriate buffer. From what I heard, I think that's the only way you can characterize it, that it seemed to be a pre-conclusion. There did not seem to be any effort to seek out a range of information to make a reasoned and informed decision, and that's just irresponsible and not in the public's best interests. You can't just say we are here, we're going to wait for the PEP to develop the standards. That could be years away. It could never materialize. That's really too convenient. You need to do the work. At that meeting, I said I would look for research, and others I know looked for research. You should have in your possession now 4 very good research documents that speak to these issues very specifically. One is actually titled The Planner's Guide to Wetlands Buffer for Local Governments. It should not be a novel idea to look on the internet and find information to make good decisions. My takeaway from the research in layman's terms is that 100 to 150 foot buffer is a sweet spot of effectiveness that balances the various factors in a moderate density area. The curve seems pretty steep where you get increased high protection for incremental buffers, and then after 150 feet, it seems to level off a little bit. If you look at other towns in Suffolk, you see a range of different buffers. At least as I saw it, a couple of hundreds, a couple of 150s, a 250, a 200, and then others have a range of 50 to 150 because they're using a multi-factor based approach, which you may choose not to do because it becomes more complicated, but then don't go with the bare minimum to just make it easy. I sincerely hope that we'll have a change in orientation. We'll look to 150-foot buffer as a starting point, and even consider a 150-foot buffer for larger lots where there's no reason for you to be that close to the wetlands. It would really be negligent not to use the information that is right in front of you. This isn't about me. I would note, though, that I repeatedly requested to the board to participate on the wetlands subcommittee. I was rebuffed every time I tried, and my biggest concern in putting my name forward was because this is exactly what I thought would happen. No one was going to do the research. We weren't going to make informed decisions, and here we are today. On a related topic, I will say I support the move from the board to move the power of the wetlands to the board. Something in the process is clearly broken. Clearly, the code is one building block, and clearly strengthening it and making it more consistent is an important component. The other major building block is simply how the law is applied. I think the general standard, as most people would consider it for pre-existing intrusion into the buffer, is do no additional harm, do not add significantly more risk. And where it is not pre-existing, but a new request, is there a significant unavoidable burden to the homeowner and you're not adding lots of risks to the wetland buffer. While I understand there may be exceptions given the shape of a lot or other significant structural considerations, significant burden starts with things like my handicapped wife can't get access to the house and I need to create a ramp that intrudes into the buffer to get her into the house. It's not, I want a bigger pool, my pool doesn't get enough sun. The case of a pre-existing ranch that sits already within the buffer, to put a new house in the same spot at 2 times the size, invariably you're adding more risk factors. Pulling a house back that is already within the existing buffer and adding structured recreational space in the buffer is also likely adding significant risk factors. I hope the board is going to be more circumspect going forward and push that circumspection onto the other boards that are under your reach and that operate within the town. We've created an environment where everybody believes their rights are much broader than they are. The ability to get an exception permit is a privilege, but some people come unabashedly with absurd requests, and we don't even blink an eye. Lastly, in the same vein, the tone and language from the board is a very, very powerful tool. In the last board meeting, you discussed blatant and egregious violations of the code, and the board was pretty casual in its discussions. Now, maybe your style is, kind of laid back and you don't show as much emotion, and, that's fine. But when fines and penalties came up, nobody seemed to know what the severity was, how that was being handled, what was the level of fines. And yet you stood there ready to move forward and grant the permit. What does that say to the public? It says business as usual. And that has to begin to change, and that changes with the board changing its tone and the way the board chooses to apply the law. Thank you for your time.
Sean, I'd like to just set your mind at ease. The current draft of the wetlands code does set a 100-foot buffer.
I'm looking at what the gentleman said in the meeting. He said 75 foot and they have to prove to me why 100.
That was one person's opinion.
Well, no, there's other people there from the board. There's other people on the planning board there. No one's speaking up.
Just letting you know, the current draft says 100.
Okay, that's great. I hope you'll.
But Meg, nothing's changed. I mean, we're still allow building in that 25 foot.
No, it's 100 foot is the buffer we set. You were in the wetlands meeting.
I know,
We set it
but
at
that's not
100.
my interpretation. I don't think it was a hard 100 foot.
Okay,
Was it a hard 100 foot, Stephen?
we'll revisit it at the next meeting.
What we can hope is it's a hard 100 feet and that changes the dynamic of where
I
we
think
are
that's
today.
the direction that we're gonna propose it, to be a hard 100 feet, except for pre-existing structures. Other than that, there's no building. It's expanding the 75-foot buffer to a full 100 feet is what the intention is.
All right.
For whatever it's worth, please do that.
I mean, I would like to see conditions on the pre-existing, that the
Yeah.
building is within the
Footprint.
existing foundation.
Yep.
We discussed all that. That was all.
Okay,
included.
all right.
And also, there was, I think the permit that you're discussing was a bulkhead permit. That was not granted. It was just allowed
I
to
know it
come
wasn't in
back.
that meeting, but I find
It's-
it alarming that you're sitting there discussing tangibly and you're not saying, has the person paid the fines? Are they egregious fines? What are the tone that we're setting? That's just
That happens.
When you're putting yourself in the public eye and that's what people see, they're thinking business as usual.
I'm just correcting the fact that it was just they are allowed to come back before the board. So then all of that can be discussed. None of that was to be discussed in whether or not they can come back to us. So
Understood.
It was a very narrow
Understood.
focus.
Take my point that
Yes,
tone
I'm just,
tone
I'm just letting you
and
know,
everything is very important.
that will be at the next stage. Jan, you had something?
Yes, I have comments on similar subjects, so I'll have to shorten them so as not to be redundant. So I also wanted to react to the comments of a prominent member of the town management, who will be unnamed here, but we all know who that is, who was pushing for 75-foot buffer, so reduce wetlands buffer instead of expanding it, okay? As Sean mentioned, there are a number of scientific publications that discuss this, in detail. So it's not difficult to get scientific evidence to say that 75 people these days is totally unacceptable and it should be enlarged. Just as an example, Southampton has 175 feet setback, East Hampton 100 feet, Southwold 100 feet, Riverhead has 300 feet jurisdiction. There is no specific setback, but it's very difficult to build anything within this 100 feet setback. So the trend is clear in other four eastern towns what the proper setback should be, and it's in no cases 75 feet. I would say that before town embarks on further discussion, if you need further evidence that this is 75 feet is not appropriate, perhaps the town board should call recognized scientists and or consultant and or special environmental specialists to testify what the appropriate setback should be for Shelter Island. I don't consider various consultants that town hires from time to time to be environmental experts. Okay, we need to have a real expertise. And finally, this wetlands controversy is just to me, it's another example why the management of the town should be professionalized and should not be run by volunteers and others who have little expertise in critical areas. And many of them have conflict of interest, which, they excuse themselves, but then other people want to commit as well. All right, the second topic I would like to discuss is the things which the town is not discussing right now, which is to stop building houses in wetlands. Again, Sean already stole my thunder. I understand that there are a number of issues which are being discussed right now, like stopping construction of large houses of 6,000 square feet or more, pyramid law, new proportionality law, which will be in discussion, and the wetland permits already have been transferred from planning board to town board, which was a good decision. Given the attitudes displayed at the planning board last week. We have reservations about proportionality law, which seems to allow excessive density for small lots and allows houses up to 10,000 square feet, at least according to the draft, which is posted on the town board website. I don't know if this is current draft or not, but that's what public can see. And we cannot speak about this at this town board because it's on an agenda. And already last week I spoke against this rule that the public should be allowed to chime in early, not just in the last minute for a single public hearing for a law. Okay, so I just like to repeat this again, that should be something that town board should discuss, and if there are disagreements, let's have a vote and see who is for increased participation of the public and who is against. It's also not clear to us how the town board is passing those zoning changes, not that I oppose to all of them, without adopting first comprehensive plan and GIS, environmental review, which we understood in prior years, that was a prerequisite for adopting zoning changes. So perhaps you could discuss this, how come last year there was a mad rush to adopt the comprehensive plan, all of a sudden there isn't, and how does that impact the legal vulnerability of the town to those zoning changes, okay? And finally, I would like to say that there are two other areas that the town board is not discussing, but it should focus on. One is the banning ZBA practice of allowing two-story large houses being built in a setback on a foundation of existing small houses in the wetlands, okay? I understand the current practice is that as long as the new house follows the outline of the foundation in the wetlands, then it's okay to build huge house where the small ranch used to be, okay? That should be banned. If there are any large houses, they should be moved beyond 100-foot zone, and that should not be easy to circumvent. Second point that the town should look at is to review all ZBA and planning board guidelines for permitting exceptions to the town code, okay? So we have all those regulations and restrictions in the town code, but then the applicants, hire themselves lawyers and go to planning board or ZBA and get what they want instead of what the town code allows, okay? So that should be really, really tightened, so it's very difficult to bypass. And we can all see lots of houses that were built bypassing town code. Oak Tree Lane, Pandion Project, Gardner's Bay Drive house north of Manhattan Line. I already mentioned the name of the prior owner, Cartwright Road, and there are many others. So I would like the town board to consider working on this. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Ray Beard Raymond, and I'm here speaking for myself today, and I'm not representing anyone. Based on the town wetlands applications over the past 8 or more years, I also feel that more rigid protections are needed in our town wetlands code, including the causeway, whether it's for new development or demolition with the intent to reconstruct more than was already existing. I'd like to talk about also what I witnessed and heard last week in the planning board meeting regarding the Wetlands Committee update. Summary of that was discussed at the planning board meeting, and it seemed to be trying to appear or persuade other planning board members to relax restrictions on the town wetland codes as both Sean and Yolanda also heard. So often, these wetlands applications do not leave any margin for even construction equipment to maneuver, as they push the limits to the maximum and seek relief to build new houses, pools, decks, or replace existing encroachments with larger or further intrusions into the town wetlands. Applications often have discrepancies in them, such as the delineation of mean high water line, test hole data that is performed at low tide, and designing to the minimum protections of stormwater runoff are a few examples. These minimums are not enough. We should be designing and protecting our wetlands, protecting our creeks, bays, and groundwater to the maximum, not to the minimum. The town is allowed to be more restrictive than the New York State DEC and the county, and we should be. We live on an island, and that in itself is unique. It's disturbing to me to listen to hearings, work sessions, and meetings where some members of that committee are recommending relaxing restrictions. I would like to thank the other members of the committee that are working towards closing the loopholes, enforcing the town code, and recommending more restrictions to limit new development and clearing within the 100-foot town wetlands. I almost fell out of my chair last week when I heard the chairman of the planning board say the nearshore overlay regulations do not apply to wetlands applications. When someone brought up section 133.12 in the town code. Now, I know that's part of the zoning code, I understand that, but I ask you, aren't the nearshore overlay regulations another layer to protect our town wetlands? I implore this town board to seek guidance from those that do not have a vested interest in relaxing restrictions. And I look forward to seeing the draft of those recommendations from the committee to the town board. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the physical audience?
So I was late, but there was police activity at the ferry station. Someone pulled up on the ferry and 2 police cars pulled up and they pulled it off the ferry. So
Exciting.
details. My name is Greg Toner and I'm here as a private citizen, not as a member of any of the. And I have some questions and comments on the asterisk procedure currently used by the town board in restricting conversation during work sessions. Is there a better word? Is the asterisk procedure? Is that what you would call it? I mean,
That works.
that works, okay.
So it's limiting public comment on legislation to the public hearing section.
So per the agenda, if a member of the public has a comment on an asterisk topic, residents are directed to send a letter to the town board. Now, and that's where I started to write a letter and I said, I wonder how this whole works, what happens. And if I send a letter on an agenda item, where in the town website is the letter made available for review by the public? I've looked and I haven't found any location in the town website. Are the letters posted?
No, it comes to us, the letters come to us, we review them and incorporate them as we roll up our sleeves and work on legislation. So we should be doing the work first. And then when we have a final product that the 4 of us say, let's move to public hearing, that's where the public can weigh in collectively so that everyone can hear everyone else's comments.
And my thought would be is that when you have, they should be posted somewhere on the website. So that everybody can understand what the rest of the public may be thinking, rather than at the 11th hour at the hearing. Whatever the posting status, I believe that the letter should also be read into the record when the topic is discussed by the town board. And that means whatever, let's see, if there's a letter for the proportionality law, which cannot be talked about today. If somebody has sent a letter in on that, you guys should read it to the public. Again, the public needs to know what the rest of the public is thinking as well. It's not just for the 4 of you to make decisions on that.
Just as
My opinion.
Just as an aside, what we've started to do is, once we do set a public hearing and post the final draft of the legislation that the 4 of us have worked on, we will, at the start of every public hearing, read any correspondence into the record then. because that's the appropriate time.
That's good, because that'll fit into the next paragraph. So,
Read your mind.
again, I believe that what possible benefit does restricting public comment on draft legislation until the public hearing? I don't understand why process even exists. Prohibiting public comment during the development of legislation is contrary to the basic intent of open meeting laws. You guys have made the best decision. You say, okay, here's the hearing. And now the public can see what the hell has been considered. My opinion, if you want to continue the asterisk procedures, my recommendation is that you read the public's comment letters into the record, and that would be each meeting, each new letter that may arrive, and post the letters on the town website. At best, this is barely an adequate improvement on the current procedure, which I think is highly flawed. So,
And just for the record again, public meetings are public meetings. Work sessions are our opportunity to work. And most municipalities, and I'm actually going to poll the 10 towns and villages, just to see if anyone else opens up to the public their work sessions. From what I've observed in watching some other, that doesn't happen anywhere else except for here on Shelter Island.
and when is the public able to communicate with you directly?
And town board meetings,
At town
which are the
board.
Monday night meetings at 6 PM. These work sessions, and in some municipalities, the table is round. And so the public just sits back there and it's only a discourse that happens because we should be rolling up our sleeves and actually working. Like today, the doc code legislation, we're going to be going through page by page. I hope we're going to get through the whole thing today, but I don't even know if we have enough time to do that. So if we start to open it up to the public, we don't even get that far. And so I'm trying to continue to move things along. But we have to do our jobs.
We can agree to disagree. Thank you. You go.
Stephen Jacobs. I never dreamed I'd stand up here and feel nostalgic for the 3-minute rule, but here I am. I just following up on Greg's comment. I really think you're doing not just the public a disservice, but you all a disservice by trying to delay public comment until you've already gelled on a position. Is it immutable, that position? No, but once it's set up for hearing and out of hearing, the horse is at least somewhat out of the barn, and it's just harder, even if good sense would suggest that it's necessary to tweak things or change things, particularly because it may result in having to set a new hearing and just further delay. I was here when this was first announced, and I heard you express the desire not to go through what went through with the short-term rental debacle, and I completely understand that. That's the last thing I think anybody would want to go through again. But that's not to say that there isn't some meaningful way of limiting public comment on issues that are in a still basically embryonic stage, whether it's saying, okay, we'll have 10 minutes of discussion about this on this meeting, or even you can stand up and say something, but only for a minute or 2 or 3. Or in terms of letters, if people are writing letters, put them on the website. I don't think there's any one way of doing it. Frankly, I'm not sure it implicates the open meetings law, but in terms of just simply good governance, I think some changes would be in order. Just a very brief comment on the wetlands issue. I think like virtually all of the rest of the public, I don't know nearly as much about this as the prior speakers or any of you sitting up here. But one thing I do think I have a sense of, and I think a lot of other people have a sense of, is appearances and conflicts of interest. And it's troublesome that at the center of this process, not the only person at the center of the process, but at the center of the process is an architect who's had clients seeking relief from the current wetlands provisions. And at dollars to donuts or donuts to dollars, that will have future clients seeking exceptions, permits, allowances, whatever. Granted, he has recused himself in connection with past applications, and I'm sure he would in connection with future ones, but that doesn't, in my mind, at least remove the taint of having him actively and in fact aggressively involved in the process of trying to come up with new regulations. Thank you.
Steve, I think I saw you have your hand up, and then I think that's Bill hiding behind the
Yeah,
podium. Okay.
thanks, Kelly.
Yes, so David Austin and then
Thanks.
Bill Maester.
David Austin, here on behalf of the Board of Past board member. Just wanted to reiterate from our meeting last month when we came and talked about interest in money back from some money coming town. We're still serving the town like crazy. And I just want to put it on the record that we'd love to see some of that come through. I'm sure you're in the process of doing all the budgeting, but I'll be short and sweet and just say it'd be really great. We're serving a lot of people in the town, and we want to continue to serve and expand the service. So there's demand. That's all I got. Be quick. Thank you.
David.
Who's next?
You, Bill.
All right. Interesting, there's so much today. If you recall, at one of the early meetings, when you guys first took over as the board, one of the things I said was thank you, because what you had done is you had allowed more public discourse. And as Meg calls me, I'm the civil discourse guy. I think you've taken a step back. And you're getting a little of that today, and I'm surprised. I was coming because I had heard Albert, and it seems a lot of other people were kind of spurred a little bit on that. I understand your issue of not wanting things to get out of control. But Shelter Island is kind of a good, unique place. We are different than the other 9 towns. And having a little bit more critical discourse is not only helpful to the public, but as Steve was just saying, it's also helpful, I think, to you guys. Because what it allows is it allows things to take an iterative kind of process, and process matters. I know I've said that a million times, but it does matter. And if the public is coming forth with something that might be helpful on an issue you are discussing related to a resolution and legislation, it is better that it is discussed earlier in the process than at the last minute at a public hearing. Because things that are reaching the stage of public hearing, they're kind of baked. They may not be fully baked, but they're kind of baked. And unless it's something, oh my God, we totally forgot, it's a lot easier not to incorporate something that might be a nuance. So I know the issue you guys have to face. And I know, Amber in particular, you're concerned about what Steve has said, that things not turn into short-term rental again. I concur. I'm not sure of the full solution, but just writing in and kind of that, no one knows what happens, is not quite sufficient. There's got to be a way to get a little bit more dialogue back and forth, and hopefully respectful dialogue, not, where the temperature just goes out of control. And is it the 3-minute rule? I don't know. But I think you guys have to consider something to allow a little bit more discussion on items and not just asterisk them and put them off to the public hearing. I don't think it serves you, and sometimes people who want to participate will just, it's an asterisk, I'm not going to come. I know I've done that. So reconsider, and I'm not saying open it for everything and constant chatter, because that's not efficient. But come up with something that maybe helps discourse a little more. Thanks.
Kim?
So with respect to what my friend Bill just said, I'm gonna just comment. There was a meeting of the Shelter Island Association last night that represents 10 neighborhoods. And, you know, we wanted to ask the board to please allow public comment at the work sessions on current agenda items that include upcoming legislation. And we got this idea because Councilman Dixon brought it up last week, and we agreed with it. And we think that providing public comment on these matters, which is what you put the asterisks on, does limit, you know, public exchange of ideas that could make for better laws and rulings. And so if you chose to reinstitute the prior administration's 3-minute rule, we actually think that would be fine and would be very agreeable to that kind of compromise, which accommodates your desire for efficiency and our desire for, you know, public input. So, you know, having said that, you know, I think there's a couple things that the board is facing right now that really have, you know, huge impact on the island. And one of them has been spoken to already by a lot of people, the wetlands. And then I will bring up another item that affects probably 2,000 lots on the island and hundreds of homeowners, which is the proportionality law. And it has not been reported that in the paper, and people don't know about it. And it really is going to affect the zoning of Shelter Island. And I think, you know, earlier, someone said, really, this is something that we should be allowed to comment on before it gets in the final stages, which other people have commented on, where it's kind of actually set in stone by the time it gets to a public hearing. Finally, my final comment is similar to the one I made last week, sorry. Is there any update on the comprehensive plan and the potential for an a general environmental impact statement? I know last week it was disclosed that despite a final CPAC hearing on which at that time, every page, every chapter of the plan was basically signed off on, the plan still hadn't gone to the consultant. So I guess the direct question is, did it go to the consultant? And then the other question is, you know, so many people in this room have been asking for what seems to make sense, which is a general environmental impact statement in connection with the plan. And it's in, you know, I won't go over all the things people have said on it, but it just seems to me that time is passing. And if you just started one, you could get it done pretty quick, especially when you're talking about all the time left that you're gonna need to discuss it and how it's going into the next year anyway. You know, I'm a lay person on this, but it just seems to me that if you started such an impact statement, you would solve a lot of issues that people are talking about all the time and have the environmental backup to support a lot of your legislative initiatives instead of having lay people such as myself come in and tell you what you should be doing. Anyway, thanks for listening.
I can give an update on the comp plan. I received the information I needed from the fire department yesterday and submitted the plan to Noah from BFJ, who's making the updates, and we should have it back sometime next week.
Thank you.
And also next week, we are putting the discussion of GEIS, EAF and all that, just a general, like educating ourselves, what it entails, what steps would be. So that's going to be on next week's agenda. So we are moving forward in a methodical fashion. Anyone else in the fiscal audience?
Something to think about. East Hampton, I spoke before their board. And
Just state your name for the record.
Tom Cronin, that's me. So I spoke before their board. You can speak to the board, they do not speak back. So if you did a 3-minute rule, let everyone voice their opinion and then sit down, no questions asked. Maybe that would help.
Is that at a work session
Yeah.
or a public hearing?
Work session.
I'm going to give anyone in the Zoom audience a chance before we circle back again. Pam?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Okay, so the comprehensive plan went to BFJ. That's really great to know that that has proceeded. That was number 1 on my list. Number 2 on my list, I'm wondering what's the status of the Middle Harbor Road Town Landing now that the dock has been removed? That was put there a long time ago. I'd like to see that town landing put back on the list for a shoreline access point. It didn't make the list when that was submitted by the SATF. And I think it should be. I actually did witness someone using that area this past weekend to get a kayak in the water. It was perfect for them to find a place to park on the side of the road and get in the kayak and come back to that spot. It's always been a town landing. I'd like to see that recognized as such. And I know that the process here is that we're not allowed to talk about any pending litigation, but the one pending litigation, not litigation, I'm sorry, legislation that you're considering is this proportionality law. And one thing I'm finding is that in order to get this proportionality law approved along the way, because it is a zoning legislation, it's classified as a type 1 action under the state environmental law. And then that would require the town board to file a full environmental assessment form on the law itself. I don't see that's been done. There's been no secret evaluation of that law. So I'd like to see that taken care of. And also because it's a zoning law, it's my understanding it needs to be reviewed by the Suffolk County Planning Commission because of course they do have jurisdiction on some of the properties and roadways and things in town. That being said, I have a suggestion for the town board to forget about this proportionality law. It's my understanding that the intent of the law was to protect the environment. And I would like to request that the town board consider adding one other item to the type 1 action lists that are in the town code. And that would be in chapter 60. And that would be something that would explain, hey, on lots that are this little, we need we're going to consider it a type 1 action for a single family dwelling rather than the state's general type 2 action as it sits now. I see that this has been a problem with a lot of these single family dwellings because they're not required to do an assessment, because they're considered a type 2 action under the state law. It doesn't do Shelter Island any good to protect its own environment. And I think the way that you could vet properties that are in sensitive areas would be to make this a type 1 action under the code. And a full assessment would be done. And then the town board could look at that environmental assessment and decide whether or not this proposed action would have a negative impact of any kind on the environment. And that would make it equally applicable across all small lots on Shelter Island. And I suppose you could make that small lot size be a certain range. I hear the conversations on this law and they seem to be talking about 1/4 acres to 2 acres. And maybe that's how that's going to be written as a provision as a type 1 action. Instead of just using a blanketed statement that's single family dwellings are tier 2, so we don't have to do any assessment whatsoever. I do think that that's the intent of the town board is to do some environmental protections. And I do think that chapter 60 would be the place to do it. I don't see any need to change the zoning code at this time to accommodate that kind of action on your behalf. So just something I was thinking about. I think it would avoid having to go to the Suffolk County Planning Commission on. I don't even think you'd have to do that. So I'd like you to consider that. And perhaps that new provision could be referenced in the Wetlands Code and the Nearshore Overlay District Zoning Code. So I ask you to consider that and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Pam. Anyone else in the Zoom audience? Jan, you wanted to a second bite at the apple?
Yeah, just to follow up on the question they asked in my short speech and the remarks on comprehensive plan and environmental impact statement that were raised by a number of speakers. So I would like to have an answer to my question. What has changed from the last year when the prior town board was rushing madly to adopt the comprehensive plan before the end of the year?
That wasn't happening. Like that's your perception, but that was not happening. There were so many more steps. There were so many more steps that were needed to happen to get to adoption.
Oh, okay, let me finish. So what has changed before last year when we heard that the adoption of comprehensive plan and environmental impact statement is necessary before any zoning changes can be made? And this year where you guys are working on zoning changes and somehow a comprehensive plan faded in the background and an environmental impact statement. So perhaps the town attorney, Kylie, could explain?
We're going to put that on for next week.
Why not?
It's legal advice.
I thought you were making a public comment to the town board.
Yeah, we're going to put that discussion on for next week. There's just some more investigation. We need to understand the parameters with which we can speak to certain things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. We will then move on to the number 2 item, the ZBA fee update request. We discussed it. We were waiting to see if there was any correspondence that was received. I did not see anything. Christina, did you see anything? Or Amber, did you see anything? That being said, then the amendment that we would change the ZBA fee schedule so that if someone other than the applicant requests an interpretation or any other type of appeal to ZBA, ZBA had requested that there be an $800 fee with 50% of it refunded if the appeal was not heard. So are we good with that for resolution on Monday?
We got no comment.
We got no comments, no, nothing. Yeah. Okay. You got that, Amber? Okay. Okay. Proportionality. Oh, and then to Christina. Forward. I pulled together something, for the meeting that I handed out, that you just had.
Well, I got 2 things. I got what Howard said.
Yes, and then I incorporated that into my schedule, but let me just,
Let's go to your schedule.
yes, just because then it had everything side by side. Getting elected.
You just want to talk about the schedule and we're going to take legal advice?
Not until the end of the meeting. The legal advice at the
Yeah.
end of the meeting, yeah.
But I guess my question is, we're going to bump this next week to take legal advice. How deep do you want this discussion to go right now?
Give me just a second.
Okay.
Because the legal advice has to do with the question of whether or not we have to do an EAF, what kind of environmental review we have to do. So we're going to, that's a separate issue from what would we want to put into this legislation. So what do we want to put into this legislation? And then next week, the question will be, how do we move forward with this legislation and what kind of reviews? So,
Or if we can.
yes, like what the timing will be. So we're bifurcating the discussion into 2 pieces.
I don't think we're ready to move forward with this.
Okay.
I've been wrestling with it for,
Mhm.
as you know, some time. I think we should have the comp plan and have that GEIS on the comp plan before we move forward with zoning changes. I've wrestled with it. I think small lot is a good idea, but there's too many other issues that I don't understand the ramifications of. And I'd like to have a GEIS. The comp plan.
We'll discuss that later. One of the things that I'm concerned about is we turn this over to the ZBA and we are trying to give them the tools to make sure that something like Bowditch Road, which has close to 6,000 square feet of house on 0.7 acres, we need to do something to make sure that that kind of thing does not happen. If we are a year out from adopting the comp plan, we'll see more of that potentially go on. So that's why I think that this legislation is important. We will have the discussion on whether or not we can move forward on it, but we're not giving ZBA all the tools that they need in order to, like, I don't think the pyramid law does much. Like that house could have been still built. All they had to do was just pivot 90 degrees. So like we passed it, it's a safety precaution. Should we have adopted that without an EAF? So
That's a question.
So like there's questions and that's why we need to go into it.
I mean, I think it makes sense to talk about the schedule.
Yeah.
And at least agree that,
Yes,
because if you're gonna take a legal analysis on that, you want the whole thing.
yeah. So,
But beyond that, let's see, Albert's point comes into play beyond that.
sorry, I meant to do.
No worries.
Anyways, a couple of things. When I went to an East End Supervisors and Mayors Association meeting last week. And so it was a much smaller group we went to the Air Force Base at Verbeski. It was really interesting. But one of the best things about it, just supervisors and mayors were there. So it gave us a really good chance to, as we were walking around the base and being shown, what they do there, to actually have some good one-on-one conversations. And I was talking to the mayor of Southampton. Yes, Southampton. And one of his suggestions, when I was telling him we were struggling with this proportionality law, he said they had just passed something where they did a percentage plus 1,500 square feet. So that's what I've added to this chart, because we've been sort of going back and forth with Meg going from 2,500 to 6,000 with her increments. I started at 2,000 on a quarter acre lot, going to 6,000. And then Albert, you had your breakpoints. And one of the questions I had for you is, you have at a quarter acre, 2,000 square feet, at half an acre, 2,500 square feet, and then at 1 acre, 3,000 square feet. So my question is that 0.7 acre lot on Bowditch Road, would they be at the 2,500 square foot mark, or would they be at the 3,000 square foot mark?
I don't know if frankly, we need all the incremental numbers. They're gonna go to the ZBA.
But my question is, this for 0.7 acres, what's gonna be the trigger? If they put in for 2,500 square feet, they don't have to go to ZBA, or if they go to 3,000 square feet, do they have to go to ZBA? I don't know I didn't understand your.
They have to go to ZBA then, if it's more.
Okay, so it's
more than a half acre lot. So if the lot is between a half acre and an acre, and it's over 2,500 square feet, they have to go to the ZBA no matter what?
Yes.
I didn't know how to write the legislation. When I'm looking at the chart, I just don't know how to write the legislation to say if this, then that. So that's what I was trying to understand. But I took the suggestion from Southampton Village, which was they do 10% plus 1,500 square feet. And when I did those numbers, was like, no. But they also don't do SFLA, they do gross area. So we'd have to change that. So I kind of worked backwards and came up with 4% plus 1,500. So I came up with like a quarter acre, 1,936 square feet. And what I liked about it was that it's whatever your acreage is, you've got a formula and you can calculate easily without having these breakpoints and trying to interpret which way to go. And it's just easier legislation, which is 4% of the lot area plus 1,500 square feet, less the SFLA of accessory buildings. So just take a look at it and, see, there's slight differences. At half acre, the number's 2,371. When you get to a full acre, instead of Meg's 4,000, my 3,500, Albert's 3,000, it's 3,242. So it's kind of a compromise
I do like the clarity of the formula. So
Mhm.
anyone at any time can look
Yeah.
at it, figure it out, and it's not too far off from where we want to be.
Mhm. And the other thing that he suggested, which they had also done in a different piece of legislation, as we were talking about it, was restricting basements and cellars to the footprint of the first floor dwelling. And I really like that because he said the reason they put it in is with the restrictions that they had on size, people were just going underground. And so like, oh, okay, I can't do my media room, so I'm just gonna build it underground and I'm gonna bump out underneath the building. And so I feel like that's
That's a good add.
it's a safety precaution
Good add.
to have in there. So I just gave you that language on this schedule. So that window wells, staircases, and egress windows, which serve a basement and cellar, which you need by code, by building code to have, may extend beyond the first floor footprint up to a maximum of 4
They
feet.
kind of have to.
Yeah, they have to, because you have to be able to get in and out if you're using cellar space. But anyways, so those were the two things that I came back with and wanted to put out there, because I just thought, as we were struggling exactly what the chart should be, my math mind says this is logical.
The small end of this, it's very nice. It's actually even more conservative than what
Mhm.
we've been talking about. But it tops out really fast.
It tops out where at, 2.6
Yeah.
acres, you can
But I'm
build
not-
a 6,000.
I'm not sure you knew anything about that, so.
Yeah, I tried to, and then it was like getting too small on the quarter acre.
Yeah,
And also, like lot wise, how many lots do we have?
no, I get it.
I would need you, Meg, to put it into, you had your non-conformity schedule.
I mean, I prefer 5%.
Now, what about window wells? Sorry, that's outside of the,
Of the foundation.
Of the foundation, like I wanted to add something in the proportionality, or wherever Stephen thinks is the appropriate
that's
place.
excluded from the restriction.
Correct,
Yeah, because
Yes.
it has to be outside.
yes,
Just
yes,
for it to actually be a light well.
right, exactly. But I thought it was a nice, simple, elegant way to deal with that, because I am concerned that the
Yeah.
mayor was like, yeah, we've had, as soon as we put in some of this stuff, people are looking for the loopholes.
Yeah.
So,
And another, if you look at other urban environments, that's what they're doing. People are building down
mhm.
and underneath out into the street.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily add bulk, which is what we're trying to do with proportionality, but I can just see abuses and.
And I like those two suggestions, actually, I do.
Mhm. So I was trying to just try and move us forward. We're not going to try and set this for public hearing next week, as much as I wanted to try and give a tool to the ZBA. It's still going to be set the public hearing, then 3 weeks, and then 3 weeks. So it's still 6 weeks out, so we're bumping it another, but I do want to address the secret question. But
I think the 4% plus 1,500 feet actually solves a lot of our problems in this chart.
mhm.
I mean, first impression, but I think it's a positive note.
Yeah, when Bill Meeker and I were talking about it, I was like, I like this, it's simple. You've got your calculator up.
Yes, I do.
Oh, are
I
you
would
doing the
prefer,
5%?
I would prefer 5% plus 1,500, and then you top it out at 2 acres. Because 2 acres is our standard AA zoning.
That brings us to 6,000 feet on 2 acres.
Right.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
But, I mean, this tops out fast, but, I
Mhm.
mean, faster than I would like to see it top out, but,
Yeah, I
we got
mean,
constraints with the math.
I can see with the 5%, like a half acre would be 2,589, and two of us had proposed 2,500, so we're not
Right.
off there.
I mean,
It's 1 acre, instead of, it's like 3678, and an acre and a half, 4,767. The 2 acres, I must have something wrong in this.
So maybe it's,
because then you just tap out
Yeah,
at 2
everybody gets to
acres.
watch.
Anything over 2 acres that you want larger
Yeah.
than 6,000, you have to go to the
Mhm.
ZBA. It's just that in the smaller acreage, you're gonna have more non-conformity due to the 4%. It's gonna compound the problem. Like, I have an issue with creating a significant amount of non-conforming properties off the bat. Because all of this non-conforming properties are gonna happen in areas where it's the more affordable houses. They're the older areas of the island. These are more multi-generational homes. These are places where it can be more burdensome for someone to have to go through the ZBA to do a simple something to their property. So I'd like to try to avoid creating nonconformity or massive nonconformity. I know we'll create some nonconformity, but I want to keep it reasonable. And I think 50% or more is excessive. I think we could do better than that. Which is why I'm leaning more towards the 5%, because then at least it's not. So I'll look at it more, I'll play with it, I'll put it through and see what the impact is. Thoughts of it?
I don't want to move forward with it.
Mhm.
I really think, we should stop. That's how I feel.
My thoughts about the fact that we want to give more tools to ZBA so that they can,
There's so many, the last work session, there were so many what ifs that you guys were talking about. What about this and what about that? I just think there's a lot here that we don't understand, or maybe it's just me, I don't understand and I'm concerned about. That I'd like somebody to look at it environmentally. And the comp plan, that's all, before we move forward. I just feel that that's the prudent thing to do. Yes, will it stop something or help stop something like Powderidge Road? Yeah, but I don't want to go forward with something and then have it regret it. And I'm not comfortable with this now, that's all.
That's understandable. I mean, so the original concept was to be setting the high-end benchmark for each area. So when we're coming in with these small numbers, that's not what you're doing. You're trying to redefine what the neighborhood should look like. So that, I think, is what's creating a lot of the problem, because now you're creating these nonconformities, you're creating these complex issues that now we have to somehow account for in the legislation. The original idea behind it was to say, this is your high end for that size property. And I was basing the original numbers off of the existing conditions. I don't know if any of you guys have looked at the spreadsheet that show what all the existing conditions are for all the size homes, and then look at that in relation to what's being proposed, then you can see exactly where you're gonna have challenges. Originally the goal was just to avoid excessively large structures on small lots. But if this is too confusing, we can take it back to the board. I think getting the smaller you get, the more restrictive you get on this, it's defeating the purpose of the large home moratorium that started the whole thing.
I just feel I feel like doing something is better than doing nothing. That's my.
No.
I do think we need to give,
Okay, so more about it, row houses.
I do think we need to give something to the ZBA. I do think it's unfair to give them a 6,000 cap, no matter what, and a pyramid law and say, have at it. So, yeah.
You were gonna say something.
And.
Okay. So we'll put this on hold. We will discuss the secret piece of this next week. Or the secret on anything that we do. Okay. Mandating IAs on, IA septic systems on property transfers.
I have to recuse myself from this,
Yes.
so. Okay, let me know when you're done.
All right, so the changes that we have put in here is any transfer on an improved residential real property within 3 years of closing, unless an extension for good cause is granted by the town board, except if the transfer is A, to a limited liability company where the current owner would be the sole member, or B, to the seller's spouse, or C, to the seller's child, or D, to the seller's sibling, or put into a trust where the beneficiary is a child or grandchild. So we got pretty restrictive on family transfers.
I actually found some good language, which I meant to send to you and I didn't. So that's on me. And I'm gonna see if I can find it now, so keep going.
Looking to see what other notes I had.
So if I could just chime in, again, this is an IA system will be mandated basically upon a sale of real estate, improved real estate. So it would have to, the IA system would have to be installed and get whatever approvals are required within 3 years of the closing date. So they have 3 years post-closing. And also if for some reason due to like grant issues or bureaucracy issues, they can't have it installed within that 3-year period, they can come to the town board for an extension of that period of time. So now the exceptions are that you don't have to put in an IA system if the transfer is just a deed change from the current owner individually to an LLC. And, you know, we spoke to the assessor and she made it clear that that happens a lot, that people, there's no money changing hands. It's just for purposes of either privacy or liability. So that's why they do it. So we decided to keep that in there because of the sheer number of times it happens. And also there is no real change in ownership, which is the trigger here. And obviously if it's going from a husband to husband and wife or husband to wife, you don't want to mandate that the system be installed at that point. If it's going from an owner to a child or owner to a brother or sister, then no IA system will be mandated. And also if you're putting it into a trust for your child or grandchild, the IA system will not be mandated at that time. But all other real estate transactions, you would have, again, to install within 3 years of closing.
And again, you know, what you're saying kind of countermands or what the assessor said, that the transfer from the individual to the LLC happens a lot. So we're losing a lot of system installations with that.
Well, it was her opinion and Reed's opinion that it was unfair. And I thought you agreed to it, that's why I put in that.
You know.
Because again, there's no money changing hands and it's the same exact owner, just put into a
No, the issue
different entity.
on the LLC, yeah, you make that transfer and it's the same owner, but then 2 minutes later, they can then transfer out interest in the LLC without any.
Correct, but then,
No.
speaking to the assessor, she said that very rarely happens, she's never seen it, and that also,
Assessor would
it's highly irregular. Well, the tax receiver ultimately, you know, because someone has to be on the hook for the tax. And also, when you purchase an LLC, you purchase assets and liabilities. No one in their right mind is going to assume an LLC and assume their liabilities. I've represented clients that purchase LLCs and the next day they're changing out of it because they don't want.
Depends on the situation, I've done it a lot. And especially if it's newly formed or recently formed. So you do the transfer and then you bring in other investors, say to develop the property. And it's easy to sort of weigh the risk.
All right, yeah, but again, I don't think they're scamming to get out of having to put in an IA system. So
That's a different point.
But again, when we had our subcommittee meeting, it was stressed from the building inspector and the assessor that it would be unfair to mandate it at that point. So it's whatever the board wants to do. It's just, that's what I put down on paper, we can take it out.
And one thing that you,
Oh, go ahead.
so one thing you just said, if they get investors to develop the property, generally that's going to trigger an IA system in a different section of the code.
That's true. That's true.
You have
Of course, you can't find it.
When Benjamin's comment was that when, if it got transferred, the LLC interest got transferred to somebody who, investors who want to develop the property, the development of the property is going to trigger an IA system generally.
That's true.
So it gets picked up in a different section.
How, I asked this at the, when we were talking this, Stephen, how is this gonna be tracked?
Again,
Who's gonna follow it?
it was between the building department and the assessors and the tax receipt. So obviously, when you sell a property, the seller doesn't want to pay taxes anymore. So they want to make sure that the buyer puts the tax bill in their name, and the buyer generally wants to have a tax bill in their name. So we will have that information of the transfers. And so that is done in the assessor's office, and then also obviously with the tax receiver. So we'll have a list, and they will work with the building department to make sure that we have a global list of the transfers that trigger the mandate, and the building department will keep it calendared for the 3-year period.
I'd like to see if we could build it into Municity, if there's a tracking mechanism.
Yeah, how do we, if somebody sells after a couple of years, sells their house, how's the building department gonna know that? Or the assessor's office, she said sometimes she doesn't get it for 6 months, the notification of a sale.
Correct. So, but ultimately, they will get that information, whether it's delayed or not. And, you know.
The house is already sold and the
Correct.
deal's already.
6 months, so that harm would be to.
But the clock starts ticking and closing.
Correct. So it starts ticking then, but if we don't get made aware of it for 6 months, that's on the purchaser, because the purchaser will lose out on that 6 months because we're not aware of it.
So we're relying on the purchaser to notify us?
No.
That's what I'm saying, how is this gonna be tracked, really?
Okay, I thought we discussed it at the meeting.
No, I'd just like to go through it again, that's all.
Okay, like I said, at some point, the purchaser of the property is gonna make sure that the assessor and the tax receiver know that they own the property, because the tax bill has to be in their name, right? Because they gotta pay taxes. Once that information is received by the assessor and tax receiver, it's going to be transmitted to the building department. The building department's gonna have a running list of properties that have to have that IA system installed. And they will keep tabs on that and keep tabs of when it expires. And then there'll be a notice of violation if it is not done, because we also have a sewage, septic registry. So we should have that information when the septic systems are installed. So, and as Amber said, if we can, I would love to have electronic means of keeping track of this. So if Municity does have that ability, that would be amazing. And then, you know, it takes the human element out of it, and it's all.
It'd be a better system, yes. How do we find that out? How can we know that if Municity has that,
Well,
the tracking?
yeah, there's, you know, they enter building permits, so we just, I think, probably add another field that's like, this is a specialized building permit that is open until it gets closed.
So how do the other town board members feel in theory about this?
I thought on 3A, I had a note about any expansion or renovation of a single-family resident, multifamily resident, or any other building capable of being used as a residence that has an existing non-conforming septic system is determined by Suffolk County Department of Health. I thought Reed was going to try and get us some better wording on that. Like, just the definition of a non-conforming septic system. Like, there's a whole bunch of like,
The intent of that originally was cesspools. If you had a cesspool, you had to put in an IA septic system. That was the intent. Suffolk County Department of Health finds cesspools. They're banned, they're outlawed in Suffolk County. They don't enforce it, but they're outlawed. That was the intent of that. to go after cesspools.
I could ask Reed,
Yeah, I'd like to see
flesh
that.
that out.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit better wording on that, because I don't want something to fall through the cracks. Because Suffolk County Sanitary Code has like failed system definitions.
That's the,
I don't think it has something for non-conforming. So I'd like to have it kind of sync up with the Suffolk County Sanitary Code. But I think besides that point, I'm good.
I did want to, but I forego it, that I wanted to see it tied in with building permits, as you know. That if somebody's doing a large renovation or an addition, they have a certified professional come in and certify that the septic system is capable of dealing with the septic flow. And if not, they have to put it in an IA septic system.
I think that's why I want to get a better language on this existing non-conforming septic system.
How about, may I suggest we put it on for another work session, bring Reed, so the assessor in to answer your questions.
Yeah.
Fully. But
To your point, I think instead of just building permits, this is like where we can pick that up. If we have a better definition on non-conforming systems.
All right, it's just with the renovation or an addition, just if this current septic system for the home is compliant, then that's fine. But to have a certified professional, a licensed professional certify that the system is capable of handling what's proposed for the house or what's being done. That's all.
so even if the renovation request is under 25%, you want some sort of analysis that the existing septic system
Yes,
is adequate.
yeah.
And I think having Reed come in is good because he can speak to when it gets kicked to Suffolk County.
well, it's number of, if you're increasing the bedrooms, particularly like if we have records that say your septic system services 4 bedrooms and you're looking to add another bedroom, it gets kicked to the Department of Health, generally speaking. So really, they're the arbiter, the Department of Health, as to when you have to update and upgrade your system in the context of a renovation addition.
I'm not sure it's the same issue as what Amber's talking about, but it's certainly related. So instead of fixing that one line, we may have to add a second one.
Yeah, but but I think, if we have Reed here, he'll be well versed in that information. But as far as, I know you still have some questions on the LLC transfer, but the others, do you have any issues with to a seller's spouse, to a seller's child, to a seller's sibling, or in a trust for the benefit? Because again, and particularly where the beneficiary is a child or grandchild.
I couldn't find the language, but if I find it, I'll send it to you. I'm actually okay with the LLC.
Okay.
At this point.
Yeah, I've gotten more comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Just talking to Judith about the fact that LLCs, they don't sell the LLC.
Yeah, you don't have that one, but.
Yeah.
I'm also trying to avoid some sort
Yes.
of obligation or tax, then you weigh the risk of purchasing what's there, but I think we're getting too far into the.
And for most properties, a $30,000, $32,000 SFIE system is a big driving force. So
That's just going down a rabbit hole.
Trying to game the system to sell. I think, now that I'm just thinking out loud here, I'm assuming that sometimes trusts are created for the benefit of a spouse. So I think we put that in there as well, child, spouse, or.
Yes, yeah. Oh, and to the point on the LLC transfers, my concern when more and more homes or properties are getting put into LLCs, that was going to be a way to circumvent paying the 50% CPF tax, and that has not played out the way people were concerned it was going to. So the property transfers are still taking place. So. Okay, next week, and we'll bring in Reed.
And Judith.
Judith.
Doc moratorium. Did you draft the legislation? I actually did not print that one.
Which,
The doc moratorium, just requesting a 3-month extension.
oh, no.
Okay, so you need to draft that, okay. Favorite spreadsheet.
When does the current moratorium run out?
August 23rd, 24th, somewhere around there.
August 23rd? Okay, yeah, I had the, like, August 6th, but then the filing date always pushes it back a couple of weeks. So currently, on the amendment doc code, if we can work on this and maybe set the public hearing for July 15th, we'd have the public hearing August 5th, amend or reject August 26th, which is after the expiration. So I think we should go with having asking for an extension.
Yes,
We can show Suffolk County Planning Commission,
yeah.
like, makes sense. Look what we got something really meaty here. Yes, yes, I think I had asked you that question when I was like rejiggering the calendar. And that way we can, we have time to, if I think that there will be some controversial aspects to this dog law, and so that we will be hearing this, having a public hearing more than once on this, after doing some edits to it, so. And then if for some reason we don't need it because we are adopting it, we can also take steps to, I don't know exactly what the steps are, to end the moratorium prior to its just sunset.
We could rescind it.
So I just want to get that in motion and get us on the calendar for Suffolk County Planning Commission. So that was a short one. Doc legislation review.
Yay.
So I figured it was going to be where we would roll up our sleeves and start going through. I don't know if the two liaisons for WMAC, if you guys want to take the lead on walking us through this, or just answer some of the questions that we come up with.
We can maybe go
Page by page?
page by page and then see if there are any comments. I mean,
Yes. I think one of the first questions to answer is, what we had been given, what was posted on the website, was the draft from May 24th that had Article 2 incorporated into it a certain way. And then we also had received an alternative Article 2 section dated May 22nd. So this was something like Bo and Bill worked together. And so which way do we want to do it? Because if we go with the 524 draft, we have 3 rules and regulations that are pulled out separately from the legislation. And the alternative that was written earlier incorporated that language. So we need to first decide which direction do we want to go with.
I think the Article 2 is good as it stands.
The one that's incorporated in the May
No,
24th,
separate.
or having it separate.
Separate. I think Bo he had offered opinion that it would be easier to legislate, whatever, if it's separate, rather than in the code itself.
I think maybe that's reversed. Yeah. Because I think it's easier if we have the rules and regulations outside of the legislative law. So we don't have to go, if we want.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, has there-
Yeah,
has there
leave it
policy.
separate, yeah.
All right, yeah, okay, then I agree with you. I mean, that's where I was coming from.
Yes.
Okay, right, okay, all right, yeah.
So do you wanna go through and come back to Article 2, or do you wanna start with Article 2?
No, if we're going with the May 24th draft,
Mhm.
then the alternative Article 2, we can just toss aside.
Okay.
And then we have to then we have to just pay attention to rules and regulations, which aren't part of the legislation, but we would want to adopt them by resolution when we adopt the legislation itself. Right. Okay, so I am going to just put a big old cross on this. We're going with that. Okay, and that was, I mean, that's how the committee ended up giving it to us, was with an updated 2 days later. Okay, so that's that, all right. So now we know at least which ones we're going. Okay,
May 24th.
the May 24th draft as it stands. Okay. So going through section by section, 53-1, I didn't have any changes.
I had just, so, oh yeah, 53-1 now.
Okay.
No, yeah,
Cool.
for 53-2, my bad.
Okay. Okay.
I skipped the title. I just had that, the general public is kind of listed twice, so at the bottom, like the last sentence, under the underline, so it says preserve and protect town waters and the environment while accommodating reasonable use thereof by the general public for general recreational fishing and shellfish purposes. I just crossed out the second general, I just felt like it wasn't necessary. By the public for recreation, fishing and shellfishing purposes, and then I crossed out and by adjacent upland owners for access to navigation, so I felt like that wasn't necessary either. Because it's not just adjacent, it's.
Well, I think that language, and then they're
Might
going.
be part of the definition of riparian rights.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to the liaisons. I watched some of the meetings live, and then I went back and watched most of the tapes. I thought that that was replacing, because we're getting rid of while at the same time recognizing the riparian rights of upland owners. So it was just kind of rejiggering that we're acknowledging that upland owners have a right to navigation.
Yeah.
But, so it's general.
That deals with their riparian issue,
Right,
really.
yes. So that was my understanding as to why it was in there, but we can also, we can always ask Phil to come back in at a later work session to go over any of the questions that we may have.
All right.
Okay. I mean, my understanding is that it is a better way to present whatever rights may exist on a riparian basis for upland owners. It was a general statement to capture a lot of those possible rights.
Okay, that's fine, we can keep it in. I think the first time I read it, it just didn't make sense when I just looked at because it goes into like the whole general public and uses of the waters, and then it just seemed almost redundant to have an adjacent upland owners for access to navigation, because they're part of the general public as well, and everybody kind of has a right to some access.
They have
riparian
specific rights.
Yeah. they-
Okay, that's fine, yeah.
And instead of going into what they are and having that argument,
Right,
we can kind of say whatever they are. Yeah.
that works. Fine with me.
The comment that I had was in the first two lines. So what was added, so this chapter shall regulate the use of town-owned docks, piers, wharves, and bulkheads, the size and placement and use of commercial and private docks. And so, and use was put in there. And so when I read that, I was like, okay, like previously, the dock law did not get too heavily into the use of commercial and private docks.
Right.
But then as I went through this, did we ever do anything where we'd added use restrictions or conditions? like, I didn't really, nothing jumped out at me.
Well, I think for the
They
plans that
introduced
you
some
put,
Yeah, I
restrictions
just,
later in there,
okay, so when we get
in
to
the code,
this, yeah, can you guys highlight them for me? Because I was just, I didn't see it, but I like,
Okay.
I've had so many copies of.
Or exceptions.
Yes.
well,
you know, that the town board can grant.
and they do add in the definitions for a private dock, they took out and or recreational purposes, so that's kind of changing the use of a dock. It's defining it as only to accommodate pleasure vessels. It doesn't include the recreational aspect of a dock. So it kind of starts changing them in the definitions.
Yeah, that's a valid point. So it looks like they want to get away from people being able to just sun themselves on a dock, that it would have to be for a vessel.
The dock is, with riparian rights, the dock is used to get to navigable water,
Yeah, and
a vessel.
But then does that deny someone their ability to have just recreational time out on their dock? Because it's not part of the
I think what they're trying,
defined usage of the dock?
well, I think what they're trying to get to is there are certain rights associated with having a dock if you want to get to navigable water. And they don't want it to be, they don't want sunning yourself to be a reason to have a dock. And I kind of think that's right, given the history and the historical definition of riparian rights.
What about fishing?
You can fish off the beach. But it's not a reason to have a dock. If that's the sole reason to have a dock, that's not good enough.
Guess you can buy a token boat to put it out there if you want to just.
Fish, huh? I see plenty of people fishing off the beach on this island.
So anyway, but so my comment was just, were we really doing and like much with the use, like regulating the use of these docks? And I didn't see much in here, and it has become an issue at times. So
I would say it would have to be more pronounced than just the definition.
right. So I'm just tossing that out there.
Well, and it
Keep
comes
it in
up
mind.
again when it's talking about other water-related structures, the use of other water-related structures. So I'm not sure how that plays out. I mean, you don't really use groins and jetties for anything other than, you
Right,
know,
yeah,
controlling water and erosion.
exactly. Yeah, that was just one of mine. I didn't have anything until we get down to 53.5 under the penalty section.
But wait, just because I'm going to be working with Bill on this. So what is the sense of the board on that restriction to just boats versus allowing people to have a dock to fish off of or something?
Let's wait till we get there. When I saw the word "and use," I just felt like they've included something that we actually haven't done anything more with. And do we want to do something more with? So, but
Yeah,
that's when we get to later sections in the code.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Gotta hold that one for
yeah, so
53 now.
nothing in 53.2 at the
Well,
moment.
it is also used later on in that same paragraph as something that was previously included here. It looks like that wasn't necessarily changed, so
So which one are you pointing to?
in 53-2 in the middle, the town board of the town of Shelter Island deems it in the public interest to regulate the, and then presence, installation are new, use, size, impact is new, and placement of docks and other structures. But it's regulating the use,
I would argue that you would have to segment this, because it seems like it's legislative intent and applicability shoehorned together, and that's just causing confusion. The applicability should just be the one sentence. And then it goes further, and I think that's more appropriate to be in an intent section.
So you would Man, that is a very low percent. So lands underwater by dredging and other means, period, that is the applicability, and then anything after that is the legislative intent?
It seems that way, yeah, and that would be cleaner and make, and also, obviously, we can rewrite the applicability section to make it clearer than a run-on sentence.
It's 4 lines long. Yeah, that makes sense to me, at least, yeah, for the moment.
So if we move down to 53-5, which is penalties for offenses, my first comment is this is usually at the back of our code.
Correct.
It got moved up, and I try to remember from the meetings, I can't remember exactly why. Seems aggressive.
And also, we need consistency in our code. So if all our penalties are at the back, that's what people expect it, and that's where it should go.
Do we have any question with content?
I do have some there.
Okay.
So, but I mean, anyone else chime in, I don't want to
But yeah,
hijack the.
I mean, consistency of the code is really important, so we can move it.
Okay, so it will get moved further back. Okay, that's good. A. I just had, because of the way we worded the recent dock fees, when we amended it, a meeting back, where we have an application fee and the permit fee.
Yeah.
I just wanted to reword it because it just seemed a little cumbersome here. A fine of not more than 3 times the sum of the permit and all other applicable permit-related fees. How about the sum of the application and permit fees? Continue on from there. I just thought that was a little cleaner.
Also, like, any permit-related offense is too general. Like, I'm gonna work with Bill and refer that to specific sections.
Yes.
And then also, ideally, you would want a numerical fine or 3 times the sum, because depending on the judge, it will be the burden on the people to, prove that that's added evidentiary process to have to, bring in front of the judge, this was the application fee, this was the permit fee, this was this and that. And then they can go back and forth, no, I didn't pay that, yes, you did, here's your receipt, and it could be, as opposed to having something clean. Because again, say if it was $1,000 and you don't feel it's appropriate that it was much more significant than 1,000, then it would be worth the effort on the prosecutor to go in there and lay out, the amounts of the fees that were paid. So I just think you should give the alternative to the prosecutor and also the judge.
But yeah, I was having a hard time with A and B. Like, which parts were falling under which penalty section? All right, my next was still in that same section under D.
Yeah.
In this section, in addition to the foregoing, any contractor, agent, or entity licensed to do business in the town of Shelter Island, having committed such third or subsequent offense, shall have their license revoked. Did we want to include the contractors or agents or entities licensed to do business in sections A through C? Because I feel like we have bad actors, we're trying to reconstitute the home improvement, licensing. I've got the clerk for the committee doing some research on that, how we can revamp this, because we're not finding a contractor within the community who can serve on the board, so we need to rewrite that. But once we do get that constituted, we have bad actors who come before ZBA and like, oh, well, The contractor at the time did it. I want to start bringing them in and penalizing them as well.
So you're saying for any offense?
Yeah, not that they necessarily get their license revoked, but they are subject to the same fines. So that there's consequences to them, not just the
Okay.
homeowners.
Okay.
Yeah, and do you have a couple of issues? One, it's calling it a misdemeanor, but then saying shall be punishable for only 15 days, so that misdemeanor is up to a year. If it's 15 days, then it's a violation, not a misdemeanor. So we'll change that to a year. And I would recommend also that we don't buy a fine determined by the appropriate adjudicating body. For a third offense, you need to have a high number there, because then it's left to the discretion of the judge, who can, $25. You know, like, you want to set,
Fix a number.
yeah, you want to set, the ceiling, like a minimum number. And then I would break out, and make a separate section for contractor liability, as opposed to, including it in A, B, C. They just have separate, and also make it clear that it's not only the owner of the property that would be liable, a contractor would be liable for any violation that occurs that they're part and parcel to.
Go back to the misdemeanor language for a second.
Yeah.
Take your notes. Okay.
Oh, yeah, just, so by definition, a misdemeanor is up to a year. By definition, a violation is up to 15 days. So if you're saying it's 15 days, then it can't be a misdemeanor. It would have to be a violation.
But no, misdemeanor is anything less than a year.
Yes, but a violation is 15 days or less. So a misdemeanor can't have a punishment of
15 days.
15 days or less, because it's a
Make
violation.
it 16 days. Or 20.
I think you put it up to a year, because that's what a misdemeanor is.
Well, listen, when you sit down with Bill, because I think their intent was not to make it such a heavy sentence.
Well, I would.
I mean, talk to
I
Bill.
would, no, I will, but I'd assure you, no one's gonna get anywhere near 1 year. And ever do any jail time, more than likely. So, but it gives, for like the egregious of the egregious violations, it gives that latitude, and it also serves as a deterrent to people.
That's true. But just whatever Bill thinks it's fine, that's fine.
Yep.
On F,
Mhm.
the town may require removal, not to bring up the dreaded Ram's Head Indock. But instead of requiring the removal, was the purpose here to give the town the ability to remove it and charge the owner?
I don't know, I wasn't.
I don't remember the discussion.
Just requiring the removal, what does that mean? I mean,
I would just say, the town may avail itself of civil remedies, which basically is going to Supreme Court and getting injunctive relief to remove it. So I just think,
that would be more clear, this doesn't really mean anything.
yeah,
When I read it. Oh, yeah, you always do, but.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah, no, I think it should be said, but I'm just clarifying for myself, we always have that ability to go and to remediate some kind of.
yes,
The court system.
it is arguable that you should have it affirmatively in your town code to authorize that, so I have no problem putting it.
Well, in regular contract law, we always say, if it's a thing, just say it. Just-
So good with the penalty section that will be moved to the back?
Yes.
Definitions. I'll go to,
There's only one we should, well, there's one we said we should refer to, but go ahead.
commercial dock. We still aren't addressing commercial docks that are used by businesses that aren't boatyards or marinas. And I feel like we should have
Right.
something in here to address how they get used, which kind of goes back to my first comment on regulating the use of docks.
What other examples are there?
We've got
The
restaurant,
Privin,
hotels.
you've got, you have quite a few, I mean, you've the.
No, besides like pre-existing non-conforming, do it.
Well, there will be the Sunset Beach dock.
Awesome.
Yeah, I feel like we're not addressing those.
And that should be regulated, especially if it's.
Well, I mean, it's like by default, it just falls to a residential dock because it doesn't meet
Right.
this. And I feel like we need an interim.
Crescent Beach is, what zone is that?
I think it's 7 maybe?
It's not B.
It's not the, I can help my point.
It's faster than you, Mac.
I think your comment makes a little sense.
I know it's gonna win. What?
I think your comment makes a little sense.
Yeah.
It is.
Double A, yeah. They called it. But the question is like, like, what do we call it? Like, or do we have a separate definition in there and then we need to put the constraints in that we want to see followed for those kinds of docks?
What we dub the hybrid dock?
Right. Yeah, I mean, we did.
Yeah,
That
yeah, I
was
mean,
what we
that's what
were
we've been calling it, but it's not defined
Because
anywhere.
it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure. So
Mhm.
it's in a residential zone, but it's acting commercially.
Mhm.
So how do we define it? So that it's somehow tagged in this.
And then what kinds of uses do we allow?
Right,
Because it's not gonna get they shouldn't get used perhaps, or they need to apply, yeah, how they get used, We're gonna let a hotel restaurant start leasing out more, dock space for
right. I mean,
overnight.
typically it's just for patrons of the establishment to come and go.
Right, yeah, we're like a launch service.
So,
So what do we wanna call it, hybrid, or?
I would recommend that we kick it back to WMAC and just have them look at that issue. And not the whole code, I'm just saying that
for
particular.
that, it definitely.
Just for them to do some homework and flesh it out and then bring it back to you so you can make an informed.
I don't like the term hybrid dock at all.
No one's married to it, but that's what it was,
But that's what we want
used.
the WMAC to help us define.
Right.
For instance, like for the Pridwood, up until this year, they wouldn't allow patrons to tie up. I mean, I've gone there in my boat, they told me I couldn't tie up, but this year they're letting people tie up. Now, was the town involved in that transition at all?
No, it's new ownership.
Yeah, no.
I don't know, I mean,
Mhm.
they owned it for the last 3 years, I mean, but they only allowed patrons to tie up this year.
Right, which they got 8 moorings, 4 patrons,
Yeah.
so they wouldn't have to use the dock.
They're
So,
still using the dock.
yeah, so,
Okay. Yeah, we need some sort of regulation.
yeah, okay, so kick back to, let's see. Under commercial vessel, I had a question. Just read this whole thing. A boat or vessel from which the owner obtains a significant portion of their income, which comes into play in a later section, and/or which is documented or registered as a commercial/passenger vessel. Would a launch that a restaurant is using to pick people up off their mooring, is that a registered commercial passenger vessel?
They're usually registered by the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
They have to carry certain.
But I don't know if that would if that's a significant portion of their
Well,
income.
that's another,
Because I was
yeah,
gonna
I've
say,
got
like,
that
I don't
somewhere
think
back
that
in here.
Sunset Beach makes a significant portion of their income off the launch service, so.
It's and/or,
Yeah.
so it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be.
It doesn't have to be that split.
Yeah, well, and
But
well,
it
when we
would,
get to private dock, that's where I linked it to, under private dock, is like a dock utilized by the
Right.
owner or occupant to accommodate pleasure vessels. So when I read that, my question was, so a launch is okay as long as it's not a significant portion of income to the owner of that?
It has to be registered as,
Well, no, go to private dock.
Well, and then, that's, I guess I'll bring up my issue with private dock when we get there.
Okay.
I mean, what
I
if
mean-
you're an owner and you have a boat that you use commercially to go fishing, but you wanna dock it at your private dock? Can I not do that, because it's not a pleasure vessel, it's my business?
That's a good question, because now
Because-
in the Condon dock, if you have a dock, then you
Right.
might not make it onto the wait list. So,
Right.
yeah, so
So, you know, in that case, what are my
yeah,
options?
there's some,
Aside from
yeah.
mooring, but if I happen to own a waterfront property and I happen to be a even part-time commercial fisherman, I should be able to dock my boat at the dock.
so the private dock definition, you want to add commercial into it?
Well,
Or just to accommodate vessels, get rid of
Well, I
the word
would say-
pleasure.
yeah,
Why
well,
does it have to be a?
well, we've got the commercial fishermen, which you were kind of saying, okay, you own the property, you can put
Right.
your boat there. But then I'm looking at it, I have a private dock and I want to use it to let a neighboring business
But that's
bring
different.
patrons from a launch
Yeah,
back and forth.
I would
So
think that's different, because if
That would
it's
never
your
happen here.
owned vessel,
That's what we're
Well,
trying to address.
and it's not a business, it's to your residential
Mhm.
property,
Mhm.
then I would say you're running a business out of your residence in that point. If you're using the dock to bring patrons to and from an establishment, you're probably getting some kind of remuneration, therefore now you're running a business on your private property. It's not a C zone, very few of those are C zones.
Yeah, no, but then the commercial fisherman is
My
getting,
personal dock, it's my private boat.
and a business though.
Yeah, but I'm not actually running a business on the dock at the time, my business is out in the water.
Okay, right, so we just, like, I'm just trying to figure out how to like properly
know.
define this. Any suggestions? Think about it.
No, that's,
That's a good
We-
question for the WMA.
yes, I think that's
Yeah.
another thing.
We need some wording here. I mean, I'll think about it. I just wanted to like bring
Mhm.
up questions that,
Yeah.
holes that I thought needed to be addressed in this. Just on domiciliary, this was a new definition that was introduced. A natural person who has actually and consistently lived within the town of Shelter Island for a period of not less than 1 year immediately preceding their application hereunder. It used to be 6 months in a different section in a different way, but
Yeah.
like, do we want to make sure people like have their training wheels on for a year before they can apply for?
That was definitely the intent and attitude of
Yeah,
the
I just-
committee.
Yeah, it could be a point of controversy when it goes to public hearing, so I just wanted to make sure.
That's what they wanted, and they were pretty adamant about it.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
yeah. I'm good with it, I just looking for, just trying to like flesh things out. On the inland waters, I'm just presuming that they caught them all. I didn't try and go through.
Oh, yeah, I have no
Yeah,
idea.
I'd like some visuals to go along with this code in some places, like I'd like a map of inland waters.
You look
I'd
at-
like to see a map of the areas where we don't want docks, like very specific, like clearly delineated, not just wind measurements, like I'd actually like to see it blocked out.
Yeah.
So people have a reference point.
Yeah.
You know, and it's one thing we say it in words, but people need a visual. You know, I look at this and like, okay, well, at what point does the red go to pink? And I'm told no. You know, it's,
No,
there's
that's
some,
a
yes.
really good point, especially when you're gonna be telling people no.
Exactly,
Right.
it's clearly defined.
And I did meet with somebody last week, who thought that the wording on some of this where we were excluding, was much broader. And then when I got the math out and said, okay, it starts here, goes here. Oh, okay, that is okay. It
Right.
starts here, goes there. Oh, okay, okay, I understand. So.
But you need to clearly state.
I just had to pull it out to say, like, this is my understanding of.
Can I ask a question? Where's Mabel's Creek?
See, that's also part of the problem, people don't know the reference points, like, you
I
have
don't
to do like
know.
a deep dive, but it's like that South Basin. It's next,
Oh, is it down there?
yeah, it's
I
down.
mean, I lived here 30 years. I don't know where Mabel's Creek is.
Yeah, I have one of those too later on. It was just more of a like. Okay. All right, so a map of inland waters.
Yeah, and when we get to the unsuitable section, we can
Mhm.
make that same change or suggest that same change.
There was a question that was left in here. Consider changing the more general definition of inland waters under chapter 128 to mirror this more detailed definition. Do we want to conform these?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Why wouldn't we? Except for Mabel's Creek.
So Stephen, is just a small aside if you could draft that. Page 2, bottom note.
Yeah.
Page 3. When I got down to pleasure vessel, all boats or vessels other than government, commercial, and institutional. We don't have institutional defined anywhere in this.
That seems to be an original definition.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I wasn't sure, like, did it just like
Wasn't me.
not-for-profits or, yeah, like,
Government, commercial, private, I mean, it's the two. Well, I mean, Cornell Cooperative are on the island doing work. Do they have any institutional vessels?
I just tripped over it when I was reading through it.
That's good. Could you ask Bill about that?
I mean, yeah, they didn't
Steven?
change it. You're right, it's the original language. Maybe we need better language. And then just the private dock, non-boatyard and non-marina fall into private dock under the existing code and the way this is written, so. Right. So I start thinking that a launch was okay if it wasn't a significant portion of the income because it's accommodating pleasure vessels, so. So that specific definition. WPC. Do you want us to take a break, Albert?
I just have to blow my nose.
Okay, we can pause if you'd like. I do feel like a private dock is also used for recreational purposes. I mean, we used to have, like at my grandparents' house, we had a dock in the Manna Creek, and it wasn't every year that we put our boat in the water, but every year, like, those were the best summers ever, just playing off the dock, whether it was swimming or fishing or clamming. Yeah, that may not be the primary intention of a dock, but I definitely think it gets used for those purposes.
But to put it in here as a reason to have a dock is what they were trying to avoid.
Right.
I mean, they had that discussion or issue, you know, in the Shelter Island Channel, below the heights. So, I mean, sure, if you have a legitimate reason to have a dock under the code, then sure, go swimming off of it. You need to turn down there and have a margarita every night at 5 o'clock.
But it shouldn't be like driving force for a dock, is what you're saying. And this,
I think it's getting tied in with riparian rights. You know, that to get to navigable water, you know, and if you use it recreationally, yeah, I mean, but to have a dock, that's the intent.
And I've received some information from a prior WMAC member. And there was work, a lot of information on riparian rights that went back and forth dating back to 1995 between Helen Rosenblum and Harmon Hawkins when they were working on this. There was some information about a court case. I'll make copies of this and share it with you. I did drop off a copy for you. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is, like, we really do need to, you know, dig into like exactly what is the definition of riparian rights and how, like, what does that entitle somebody to? You know, in addition to property rights, riparian rights. And I know you also said riparian rights isn't the right word for
it's not a river.
outside waters.
Literal rights.
Yeah. But one of the things that I thought was interesting, especially if we are limiting where people can have docks, is I was highlighting a section. There's a New York coastal management plan that the state has, and then there's even like more specific is a Long Island coastal management plan. And the coastal program used to provide, and I have to check because this dates back to 2001, incentives to local governments to develop local waterfront revitalization programs, which are comprehensive plans for the use, development, and protection of coastal resources. It allows municipalities to refine the program to their circumstances, was what was quoted in this, you know, analysis of this court case. And I know LWRP, Local Waterfront Revitalization Program, came up in the discussions of the comprehensive plan. And I think at the time, a lot of people were like, no, we don't want one of those. However, in conversations that I had with our grant writer earlier in the year about, because there are grant monies out there for LWRPs, like one of the uses is to define how we want our coastline to look like. It's not that we're going to develop it. How do we want to protect it? So I'm just tossing it out there because it's a tie in back into, if we do one of these, it gives us better guidance for enforcing something like this, that we don't want to develop our, you know, outside waters in the manner that could go. And if we do one of these, it then goes to the state and federal governments for approval. And then we're not out there just defending our own code. They can adopt it into what the DEC looks at, because the DEC pretty much approves like anything that's given to them. They approve most of the time. So if we can change the Long Island Coastal Management Plan for what we want to do, then they will take some of that into consideration when looking at our applications. So I just toss that out there, like that's something, once we're done with the comprehensive plan, then we can start to look at that. But that is a tie-in to this kind of legislation.
Another level of control, actually, or protection, really,
Exactly.
protection.
Exactly. I just wanted to toss it out there, but I'll give you this, you know, this, but getting back to riparian rights, that was a little inside.
We know the committee looked at the history of the definition of riparian rights to get here. And it certainly has changed in recent history, you know, since 1995. So, I mean, we can talk to them about how they got here, but it wasn't by accident.
Yes.
Also, the management plan you just mentioned could be an important backstop to what's going on in this code change, because this legislation is suggesting that we change people's rights. And we're gonna need a backstop to it.
Bill was maintaining that the right has been held to not be absolute, that yields to, you know, local government, municipality government.
Yes.
And that's kind of what's where things are now, as far as riparian, right?
That makes the plan even more important.
Yeah, you absolutely have the right to regulate waterfront properties.
And that's not the common understanding of the term. The term is, I have riparian rights, you can't touch them. And I'm gonna put a dock here, or I'm gonna have a mooring. I'm entitled to it. You know, there's health, safety, and welfare. That kind of comes in the middle of that.
Yeah, it's kind of divided. Riparian, it's almost like riparian is the public has access between the high water mark and the, you know, to access a beach. And an upland owner has access to navigable water,
That's
a mooring or a dock.
It's
It's kind of,
public land and private land.
So, like, we have one definition in here. There is a definition in 90-4 where we talk about riparian rights, and it's closer in this version, but it's still not exact. So we need to figure out what we want, and then in 90-4, I think we should conform it.
Yeah.
So maybe take a look at what's here, what's in 90-4, and we can come up with something that. Unsuitable locations. Somebody said they had.
Before that, upland,
Mhm.
does it need to be specifically privately owned? Because there are some town properties that are on the water, so it's really just the land above the mean high water mark, whether it's privately owned or not, right?
That's what I understand, yeah.
Yeah, so we can get rid of privately owned there. I feel like it was too specific, because you're gonna have some, you know, either Mashamic is, you know, privately owned, but also like a not-for-profit. You're gonna have different situations. Yeah, unsuitable locations, I want a clear map defining areas.
And they did one, so it can't be hard to add it in.
And maybe we get lat longitudes. And you could also just do it by properties on the tax.
Yeah.
You know, it's like district
Mhm.
properties, because some of them, you know, like the outside of Ram Island, I mean, a lot of that's causeway. And then there's a lot of state and county owned properties in the Hay Beach area, heading out to Hay Beach.
The way they described it was pretty good, I thought. I mean, from Hay Beach Point southeast, the Cornelius Point, then southeast along up, it's almost, it's
You're
a
gonna,
light meets and bounds description.
right, it's just like, when you get to Hay Beach Point, okay, well, which property on Hay Beach Point is too far? Or is not far enough, you know, you could get controversial in the.
All right, so where they start, you wanna know where they start and end?
Right,
Yeah.
yes.
I want them to just like.
Is it,
It needs to be
Is it this-
unambiguous.
is it this pink triangle or is it this red triangle?
Right,
So where
like,
is
where's
it,
the
like
cutoff?
where, like
Yeah,
that's all
where
we
you
need.
start.
So,
Okay.
yeah,
no, that's a good.
You can
kind of
start.
a general
yeah.
You know,
wording.
because the point is like 12 properties, so where are you drawing the line? Is it Highbury? Or is it Orient Lane, like, is there?
That was all that I had in definitions.
And then dock inspector would be a member of the building department. Building inspector or someone else that we identify and authorize to be the dock inspector.
So the definition that's in here, duly appointed building inspector or other authorized individual of the town of Shelter Island, is that too broad or?
No, I just want to make sure that when we look through the whole thing, we're not piling too much on the building department, or, is it something that the harbor masters could do? Or, is there, as we read through it, just how is it gonna functionally work in our structure?
Yeah, 'cause this is pretty broad, this is the
Yeah,
building inspector
it
or anybody
gives us-
else.
Yeah, it
Give
gives
you
us
and
the
me,
ability to
Meg.
define it how we need to, and when it comes to like structure and enforcement, but I just want to make sure that we're keeping it in mind as we go through.
Well,
Okay.
when I read that, that's somebody that we would appoint. So
Right.
just as like Reed is the fire marshal or the
Yeah.
fire, well, I can't remember exact his title, but we do appoint,
Mhm.
every year. Like, that's one of his duties. So I think
Right.
we'd be including that in the organization meetings.
Right.
And then also the wetlands officer or something?
And I think broadening it beyond building inspector is good.
Yeah.
And again, we also need some governmental employee that has access and can drive a boat to be a dock master. So a lot of times when we have issues, we have to coordinate with Keith, get the harbor master, get Reed on a boat, and then, which they've been very helpful. But if we could find somebody that's already on a boat to do it, that would be.
Yeah, that was kind of. All right, so with Article 2, we're gonna keep this Article 2,
We're going with draft 524.
right, which is,
Is that in SharePoint?
It's part of it. You just continue on.
Huh.
Instead of going with the inserted one, we're just going with what they gave us. But they gave us the option to.
yeah, and then we're adding the amendments.
It's, hold on, is that the end?
Policy.
No, it's
on
in there.
page
Oh, so the one that's there is
Yeah, the
that.
one that's there.
Mhm.
Check that.
So I was looking at what got taken out because now a lot of this stuff is going into the rules and regulations. So the first one is Ogden Creek. So Connington Creek Dock Piers and Wharves, so 1, 2, 3, 4, all are going to the rules and regulations. So we'll set that via policy or resolution. Number 5, initial and renewal permits may be obtained directly from the town clerk upon submission of proof satisfactory to the town clerk that said permittee is a resident of the town of Shelter Island and owns the same. I don't think that what's in the rules and regulations is clear. Like who's taking that over? And I thought that maybe we were going to move towards the harbor masters having that function. But I just felt like the old legislation was clearer on who had responsibilities. So we just need to incorporate some of that number 5 language into a later section or preferably rules and regulations.
So,
Okay, permit as prescribed by this chapter.
And maybe Stephen, when you and Bill sit down, you can kind of just look at that. Do you know which section on
No, I'm trying to find it.
that? It's 53-8,
What page on it?
page 4.
The new 9 or the old 8?
Crossed
It's
out.
the new 8.
yeah, the
Knew it.
Crossed out 5.
And, because, yeah, this would be incorporated into the new policy regulation.
Yes, and I just don't think that that got transferred over into the policy section, the rules and regulations for Concord Creek Dock. I don't think I've made it in
Okay.
clearly as to who's got the responsibility. And it's just the first sentence.
No person shall dock, moor, or secure.
no, initial renewal permits may be obtained
Yeah.
directly from,
It's just.
because the renewals are being done on online warrant, right? Or,
Warrants, docs,
Oh, right,
everything with
warrants.
docs, this was town clerk's office.
oh yeah, didn't we talk about putting docs into online warrants? Maybe that was a weird conversation how we.
It was something that was discussed.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and then the last part, the last sentence of 5 also. Gave responsibility, assigned by the town clerk to the next applicant on the wait list. I think a little bit of that got lost
Right.
between,
So the wait list we're putting on online warrant.
And anyone looking at it will be able to see where they are on the list and who's ahead of them?
Currently, there's only a couple of grids for moorings, but not, Condens Creek dock is not yet. Everyone kind of decided what we were gonna do.
Now, that would still be managed by the clerk's office, the wait list. You would add people. Yeah.
and when we flip over to the rules and regulations, it's addressed there, but I think it is clearly town clerk involvement. I was good through the rest of section 53-8 new, where we took out the Condon Creek piece. So I wonder if we should then flip over to the rules and regulations for a minute, just to go over things that got mixed. And there's also some notes in here for things that need decisions to be made, or just comments about what they changed. Under vessels, the beam of the permitted vessel shall not exceed 10 foot 6 inches. I presume somebody measured it, like when I've gone for boat rides from people, friends who've got boats over in Condon's Creek. It doesn't appear that the slips are all the same size, so just hopefully somebody measured that.
So Bo, Bay Constables, not just Bo, they know what boat can fit in which slip. So whenever someone applies, obviously they provide us with their boat and they'll make adjustments to which slips people can go in.
Every marina operates that way
Yeah.
for docks and moorings. And
But since we were getting specific on the beam of a boat, I just want to make sure somebody who knows something measured it before we put it into
Sound.
the rules and regulation, just, yeah. Under the permit issuance, there was just a note, we currently have multiple generations concurrently owning vessels in an attempt to prolong occupancy. So it looks like the permit issuance is going to be issued to one person and valid year by year. And not more than one permit shall be issued to any one household. So I presume this is what they are suggesting to kind of loosen up the wait list.
So currently, if someone applies, they'll put their whole family on the application. And so it just goes down generations because they're on the application. That is the reason. I'm assuming.
Now, are we okay with this?
Well, so my next thing is no permit shall be issued to an applicant who owns waterfront property. But if we're going to not allow portions of waterfront property to have docks, then we should open the availability of Condon Creek dock to people who own waterfront property who are not allowed to have a dock.
Yes, that's very good. I missed that.
That's a good point.
Yeah. It makes sense if we're not, banning people from having docks, but if we are going to regulate it so there are areas of the island where you can't have one, it makes sense that you would then open up the public town docks to them.
So excluding those in unsuitable locations.
Right. Yeah, who own waterfront property with the exception of those they fall under the specific category.
And depending on what comes back with residential, commercial, and whatever's in the middle there, if we tighten up the use for the commercial fisherman at his own dock, then we might want to allow commercial fishermen.
Right.
But we can revisit that depending on what WMAC comes back with.
Yeah, we currently allow applicants that own their own docks to, so that's definitely an issue.
Under renewals, we don't have a limit on renewals. So it leads to de facto lifetime tenancy. But we're not changing, this policy isn't changing anything other than timely renewals.
I mean, I think enforcing the timeliness of the renewal is enough.
Under change of vessel, that goes to the town clerk's office for review and approval. Note, a change of vessel may pose occupancy issues should tenancy terminate with vessel change. I don't think so. Like, you should be allowed to get a new boat.
Yes.
Right.
It's not losing your dock.
Exactly, exactly.
I think what they're touching on here is that if you change your vessel, it may not fit in your old slip and there may not be another slip for you to go to.
Ah.
I think that is kind
But no
of,
matter what, a change of vessel needs to be approved before they put the water,
right.
put it in the water. Which goes through FO and WMA.
Right.
Although I guess if you're gonna change your vessel and your dock is, or your slip is only so big, then you should take that into account yourself before you buy the new boat. So
Right,
can't guarantee you.
right, we can't,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I don't think it's a de facto termination, but
Yeah,
it's,
more of a buyer beware.
They also have the limit of how big of a boat you can put into the.
right.
Yeah, that was, yeah, that's under vessels, no longer, longer than 35 feet at condo fleet. Under wait list, so that's where I also, like previously, the wait list was kind of managed by the town clerk.
Yeah, why?
So now it's saying developed by Waterways, the policies and procedures developed by WMAC and approved by the town board. I just would like that fleshed out a little bit more. How that process is gonna work. So when you and Bill meet, that's definitely something for discussion or for Bill to come back in. Currently, it says there's no formal process for handling the wait list, but I thought it was FIFO.
So there's a wait list, people get added to it. You go through the wait list, make sure that the resident meet the requirements. If they pass, they lose their spot, they go back down, they need to reapply every year to be on the wait list.
So you don't lose your spot if you reapply properly.
So if you're next in line and you pass, you're going down. So that way you move people
Right.
up who do want the slip. Because I have reached out to multiple applicants and they pass 6 years. One guy has been on one application, third place, passes every year. That's not fair to the next applicant.
Right.
So you go
So
back,
we bump them to the
reapply.
bottom of the line.
I was on the list for 6 years before I got my mooring.
Mooring or,
Mooring,
oh, okay. Try getting them to Condon Creek, what's that?
oh, forget it. I wouldn't even try.
Decades?
40 years.
I wouldn't even
Yeah.
try.
All right, so it's, yeah, this stuff, I think it just needs to be fleshed out a little bit more. Occupancy. So any resident holding a Condon Creek Town dock permit must have their permitted vessel berthed in their permitted slip from July 1st through September 30th. No more than 3 absences up to 7 days each are permitted during July through September. And then the note says currently casual use and/or short-term trips are not clearly permitted. I didn't really understand what's being said here.
They don't want you to hold on to the slip if you're not using it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit of an awkward way to do that, but
And so they're suggesting with the 3 absences that will, okay, so it just enforces,
who's gonna police that? Are there cameras down there? I mean,
harbor masters?
we're not gonna
Yeah.
know who's coming and going and what slips are empty and.
Yeah, I mean,
It's
It's
one of those
more-
things where they didn't
it's-
want people to just not put their boat in the water for a whole season, and not use the slip when someone else
Yeah,
would.
yeah, I want you to use it. I mean, as far as a, here are the rules kind of statement, sure, but there's no way to enforce that
of course,
in
yeah.
this town.
Yeah.
Unless you put up cameras.
Big constables will enforce it. They know what boats are missing, what boats
Oh, yeah.
which is right on top of it.
They definitely.
Okay.
Authorized absence. Unable to meet the occupancy requirement may be granted an authorized absence, provided such an absence is requested in writing to the town clerk prior to June 1st. No more than 1 authorized absence shall be granted during a permittee's tenancy. No portion of the permit fees paid shall be refunded in the event of an authorized absence. So what happens there? Someone says, I'm not putting my boat in because I'm like,
I'm sick or my
surgery,
boat's
having
damaged
hips-
and I need to fix it.
yeah, I had hip surgery this year, so I can't do it. So,
Currently, they allow to sublet. They can sublet to someone who is on the list for that season.
okay.
And we currently, as it stands, it's only one time that you can do that.
And back, the next year they're back in there, or they give it up. All right, so it says the note is 2 authorized absences are currently allowed. There's a 23-year wait. Authorized absences have previously been poorly documented and managed.
That is correct.
Okay, so we're just gonna do better. The town clerk's office. Okay, all right.
But
That pesky town clerk.
as it stands, there's only been one person, 3 years ago, done that, which has been documented.
I made a note to myself, under off-season subletting, off-season sublet application. Like, do we have such a form?
Somewhere in here.
I'm just curious. Never heard of it
Bland,
before.
but yeah,
Sorry, what page are you on?
We are on the Condon Dock Town Creek Permit Rules and Regulations on the bottom of the 2nd page. Oh, no, it's part of the Condon Creek. It's a separate 3-pager. We have, yeah, we have Condon Creek, and we have Deering Harbor, and we have Dickerson Creek. So we're on the Condon Creek Town Dock Permit Rules and Regulations.
That's outside of the drum.
Yes, because what they have suggested is in Article 2, they've pulled out a bunch of things that used to be in legislation and they're turning them into policy, rules and regulations that will be adopted by resolution. Yes,
I don't think it's posted right now.
Yeah, it's
it is. That's why I printed it on. And go to the top, go to government. And then upcoming hearings, pending laws and discussion documents. And then if you go down, you'll see the dock law, dock code revision, and you've got Dickerson Creek Town Dock Permit, Daring Harbor, and Condon Creek.
Oh.
And then under violations, oh yeah. Any violation of these terms and conditions may result in the revocation of Compton Creek town dock permit. And the note was currently 2 violations are required, followed by a noticed hearing before the Waterways Committee. The Waterways Committee is currently you and me,
Oh,
but we've never functioned, and I don't think that the Waterways Committee has properly functioned since Peter Reich was on the town board. But I know you, when you were last on the town board, you were on the Waterways Committee, because it's generally whoever's liaisons to WMAC is on Waterways. But in your recollection for 4 years, did you have anything that came before you and Jim? Because I think Colligan was,
Yeah, the two of us, yeah.
yeah, did you have anything that ever came before you?
No, I don't remember anything like that.
Yeah.
do we have anything down?
Well, that was part of the issue, because last year or 2 years ago, or whenever BJ was here, we tried to figure out exactly what the charge of the Waterways Committee was. And we had the clerk go through all the records to see if there was any definition or description of what the job was. And we couldn't find one. And so it sort of doesn't quite exist, like
Sounds like a,
in policy anymore.
well, it sounds like a due process mechanism. So if someone is being a problem and you want to pull their permit, it's a due process escape valve. It can be heard.
And supposedly there's other parts of the code somewhere where it says the Waterways Committee can unilaterally approve certain kinds of applications and other things. Wasn't there,
It needs,
was-
it definitely needs cleanup,
kind of
yeah.
just needs to get pulled out. It needs to die.
Why would we ever want to do that?
Let's clean it up.
No, no.
Do unilaterally, yeah.
Right?
I think it's sort of a throwback to, I mean, other towns.
Like resurfacing a dog, like putting new planks on, or certain things you could just kind of get approval to do through this Waterways Committee that has undefined parameters.
Sounds like a hand grenade. No.
Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is sort of like a throwback to other towns and villages who have a town board, and then they have town trustees or village trustees who only deal with waterways.
And they're elected officials, the
Right,
trustees.
right.
And like, if you don't have trustees, you wear the hat of the trustees,
Right.
so.
So
Yeah,
this would
both,
be
yeah,
a
both roles,
Totally defined trustee hat.
yes.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not in this rules and regulations, but it's just.
So what do we want to do about this?
I think we can leave it for the moment, but at some point we should pick up what Waterways Committee.
I mean, it does really sound to me like this is a due process mechanism, and that's all it should be. So
Yeah.
it should not have unilateral decision-making
Well,
power.
Right.
Well, the town board should be the body
I was
to
gonna say this-
determine whether or not it should be revoked.
Correct, that's what I was just
Yeah,
gonna say,
yeah,
you know, it
rather
shouldn't
than
be the
just two of
WMAC that does it, it should be the town board.
Yeah, and not
that
just-
puts out
Should the,
polls.
should the WMAC hear it first or go before them
Give
and
us a
make a recommendation to the
recommendation.
board?
You should come and present to us, a representative from the WMAC.
Okay, whatever.
Come to the town board and make the request.
I would think their input would be good.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. but just as, you know, docks, bulkheads, mooring applications, it's the town board that approves and disapproves with input from WMAC. It should be a similar process. Okay, so now we can go back to,
Deering Harbor Town.
yes, so where are we? We are on, oh yeah, so page 5, the crossed out section for Deering Harbor. And
I think these are relatively identical.
yes, yeah, so I didn't have any new comments on this section. And the Deering Harbor rules and or Deering Harbor Town Dock Permit rules and regulations.
Well, actually, they should be consistent. And like if you go to violations, it's not consistent at all. Any violation of these terms may result in revocation of your permit, but it doesn't talk about they should kind of be uniform if we can get them close to being uniform. Does that make any sense?
Just
Mr. Bradley?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, we should have one and then kind of change the name and print it off.
Right. Consistency.
Keep going. I just need to follow up on something. The Commissioner of Public Works needs a consult on something. Excited today.
So, I mean, we just went through all the changes for Congdon, which should apply to this, but we should just make 3 new ones, but that are basically uniform.
What I would recommend, again, because the town board members had questions, right, that Bo would know or Bill would know, that as far, I think we revisit the rules and regulations for each individual town dock and bring them in to answer your questions, and they can justify why they were doing certain things. That's just a suggestion of mine, that we just keep going through the code and leave the regulations to another work session where you could bring Bo in and Bill.
I think that's a good idea, Stephen. There was a level of talk about it with the WMAC, but Bo had some ideas.
Yeah, he has the working knowledge of it.
So, cool, so
There are some, we'll get to another day.
yeah, so now 53-8 docking restricted has been boiled down to A and B. No person shall dock,
Yes.
I mean, so that's pretty much it.
Yep.
So I had, for A, I made a little adjustment, I had no person or entity shall dock, moor, or secure any vessel to any town-owned dock, pier, wharf, bulkhead, unless we defined person as an LLC and other. How did we?
Yeah, we did.
We
We
did.
did, so then it
Yeah.
can just stay
It
person.
should be fun, yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure that it covered LLCs and all the other funny things that people are coming up with.
Oh, they define it, they changed this stuff. A natural person, human being as distinguished from a person such as a corporation
That's what I
or other
thought.
entity created by operation.
Right, which is why I added entity or something else to capture.
But a living, breathing person would be docking it, not the LLC.
Right, it would be the physical person. Unless, I don't know, do drones drive boats now? Yeah, I'm just,
That's good to point it out.
yeah, I wasn't sure, if, like Barton and Gray just randomly docks a boat there, is it the captain or is it?
Yeah, we're gonna ticket the cap.
I just want to make sure it made sense. So then the next section is 53-9, permitted docking, permit required fees, temporary use. Essentially that. I thought I said it in the room.
That seems redundant.
I was just thinking that. I was like, didn't we just talk about that?
Yeah, I think we can actually take out that whole docking restricted, because it's gonna be covered in the regulation.
What provisions of this chapter should cover?
Yeah, because the title is permitted docking, and the previous section is docking restricted, so it's
Right.
the antithesis. I think we can absorb A and B into 53-9, make
Okay.
53-9, 53-8. Get rid of
Yeah.
the folder.
Yeah, I mean, because this does cover more than just the Congdon, Deering Harbor, and, because it also goes into Grace's Lane Bulkhead and the Daniel Ward Road dock, which is just used for active loading and unloading, not necessarily
You're saying take 53.8, roll it into 53.9 and get rid of 53.8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The note Amber has here kind of reverts back to the policies that we can go over. And then. Shore Road Town Dock. Where is Shore Road Town Dock?
Shore Road.
It's next to Mabel's Creek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, take the right off.
It's like, that was the question Amber had, and I was like, that's a good question. I always think of that as the, okay.
Quinnipiac Dock.
Quinnipiac Dock, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it down landing?
It is
It
still
is
a
a
town
town
landing,
landing.
yeah. And I know Ken talked to them about moving the way they orient their floats so that people have cleaner access to use the ramp. Because last year, the way they were closer to the ramp and it was hard for people to launch boats there and such. So they actually moved them to the further side of the piers and then
I always wonder where
they rearranged it a little bit.
trips, whenever they,
Yeah.
where do they?
But I think that's part of the issue is people haven't really been using it because they don't realize it's a town landing, but it is one of the town landings. Ken tried to make it more user-friendly for the public.
I always thought it was Quinnipiac stuff.
Nope, it's town. It's-
What was I was thinking,
Alright. So we got through, I flipped the pages, so you could be on the literal same page. Okay, so you made it through Deering Harbor and, so we figured we'd have Bo come in and talk policy with him, but we did combine sort of this part and this 53-9.
Oh.
Merge them into one because it didn't quite make sense.
Okay.
And that was Stephen's recommendation. It made sense. Looking at it, it seemed redundant. And then for this one, we figured we can discuss that with Bo when we do policy on all the docks.
Okay.
Because it's,
Yeah, because you're raising a lot of good questions that Bo would probably have answers at the tip of his tongue. So I suggested that we push off the rules and regulations for the other town docks to a next work session where we can bring Bo in to answer those.
Well, this one was actually in the legislation, which, on page 6, but,
the Deering Harbor dock.
the Daring Harbor, between September 16th and June 14th for no more than 10 consecutive days on any one occasion. But I just,
Right.
Well, we should find out.
yeah, how did we get to that number? And is it an okay number? And does it include other people from?
And also, there should be an effort to make them as uniform as we can.
Yeah, okay, good. All right.
And so essentially, we got up to Article 3.
Okay.
That's Quinnipiac, the Quinnipiac.
Oh, yeah, the shore.
Yeah. I read your note and I was like, it's a good question.
Yeah, so your question, I'm like.
Next to Mabel's Creek.
Actually, no. I think I've paddled up Maples Creek before.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for answering that one.
How many docks are warned or kept?
Sorry.
How many permits are issued for that?
Town Landing Creek?
Shore Road dock?
It's
Oh,
a
there-
town landing, it's just the,
Just-
yeah. It's no permit, no blink, you pass right by.
No, but Albert's question is a good one.
Yeah,
It's-
but, I mean, it
it's a
says to secure a permit, license agreement.
Yeah,
The current rule, there was a contract, between the Quinnipiac docks, so that was their dock. That's, we
Right.
gave them permission to use for Quinnipiac, so
Okay,
there
there's
has
no other
not
private
been,
vessels.
no,
Not a
that
tinker.
doesn't stand.
Correct.
just,
There's no permits being issued.
just Camp Quinnipiac have a permit. Or they don't, no, they use it.
Or lease
They-
agreement,
Have a lease,
Lease agreement.
lease agreement.
when does it expire? Oh, it already is expired.
It's time to renegotiate, I guess.
Okay, here's another
I didn't have
thing.
that on my- I didn't have that on my list.
Someone needs to call them.
Didn't have anything really till page.
Page 9, you said?
I had, as we get into Article 3, commercial and private docs, right? Yeah. I had a question for A4. Less than 50% of the original structure supporting members such as pilings and framing remains in a structurally sound condition as determined by the building inspector or by who is my question? As determined by what entity? Sounds like a powerful title. Yeah, because we built that into, prior to the moratorium, I think we built that into at least the last 2 dock permits we issued.
Yeah, it would have to be the dock master, not dock inspector, sorry.
Right.
And it's, I mean, we don't have a dock inspector, but
It would be,
it's Bo.
Could be
we're going to be appointing
You
one.
have to decide who you want.
Okay.
And this is not a new person, this is someone that gets an extra
Title.
title.
Yes.
More work, less pay, that's.
They should join the town board.
Just a procedure thing here that I'd prefer to do. I'd like to break up commercial and private, because there's a lot of commingling that causes confusion between the two. So make it 2 separate articles, maybe,
Maybe even 3.
maybe in 3 with the hybrid.
And then there's institutional.
I mean, for the crazy,
Define.
is that for the crazy people?
It's for everybody at this table.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, we've gotten a little bit of pushback on the digital file. I think people are confused with the georeferencing and how to do it. So that, I just had a comment that, people have complained about it. It might be an onerous thing to incorporate. Although I think Bill had answered a question in an email that was, it was, I like to answer, it was like, okay, it's not a heavy lift.
Thank you, Albert.
I think people have been doing it.
Yeah, I don't think it's as heavy a lift, especially, yeah, if it's something that's simply like it's easy to do. I'll try and pull.
It's something easy to do for the dock contractor.
Yeah, as
Yes.
long as it's something
Yes.
that a professional should be able to navigate. Not hiring more professionals, I think it's.
I'll see if I can pick that up and bump it up to the top of the thread. Yeah, I think it was his friend's 6'5", Bill sent the response. Okay. Or Matt, I think Matt sent the response. Yes, it was Matt, it was Matt. How it works, yeah. So it's okay. Yeah, I got it somewhere too. I have paper. Okay, where are we?
We are in C, somewhere in C, right?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah, so
really
I
have.
didn't have anything for the rest of page 8.
Page 9. Okay. And then I have A at the top. where it says devices, so it says all applications for permits shall be subject to a public hearing except that
Give me section number.
oh, very top A.
Oh,
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 5310
It's not,
A?
you didn't print on the same. It's 53-10.1 permit issuance terms and responsibilities, and then A.
okay, now I'm with you.
Yeah, sorry, I realized they didn't all print the same.
Yeah.
All applications for permits shall be subject to a public hearing except that applications to repair or maintain in kind and in place conforming and non-conforming devices or structures included in this article. So does devices refer to things like boat lifts or trolleys? Like what is that? How,
Yeah, I don't,
what does a device mean?
Well, I know
I mean-
boats are banned in this new legislation.
Right, which is,
Yeah.
but we have some that are pre-existing.
Non-conforming.
So, you know, or is it like kayak racks or, you know, there's, I don't know.
Mhm.
this is talking about docks, this
Right.
section, this article. So
Which is why I was confused by the devices.
devices seems to have been the term used historically, because it looks like it was already in the code.
Maybe it needs to come out.
Maybe we just change it to
It's non-conforming
docks.
structures, just get rid of devices altogether. Included in
Let's see
some.
what Bill is thinking on it. Because what do they call those other things, like, not the floating docks, dolphin.
Other water-related
But
structure.
I would consider those structures.
Yeah.
So I wasn't sure what a device was. I wasn't sure if there was like a pulley mechanism that you would use for something. But,
Mhm.
you know, I will, yeah,
Let's see what Bill is thinking.
okay. So that was my one question on that.
Yeah.
And then the next one I had was an I. So does anybody else have anything to get to I?
Nope.
I'm an I as well.
Because I do not understand I, and I want a visual, I need a diagram. I can't.
And a flow chart.
Word this and make it function for me.
I didn't think it belonged in this section.
Yeah.
Because it's not a permit item, it's more a dock responsibility. And it has penalty implications, so I
Right.
thought it needs to come out of permit issuance. And even where we have permit issuance terms and responsibilities, I feel like permit issuance should be separate from permit, or like, it's not even a permit responsibility, this was like a
Well, if you're gonna
I
responsibility.
think it's a section additional provisions that we can throw it in
Yeah.
there.
That's
Yeah.
fine.
But even then, this needs to come with a visual description of what this means, like draw me a picture. I was trying to figure it out, like,
Basically what it is, I think they wanted to mimic, and I'm just guessing here because I wasn't
yeah,
part of the conversations, is you know how we have a unsafe structure? And if, you know, the building department deems a house to be a common
Yeah, it's
structure, comes to the town board, issues a report, it's unsafe, then asks for the town board to have a hearing on it, to have it removed. You have to give notice to the owner, then you have a hearing in front of the town board whether or not to go ahead with the removal of said dock. So I think they tried to mimic that.
oh, yeah, that's right. The one I looked at a one and thought it was an I, so the next page is where I really have my what's. Yeah, so no, that makes sense, but I did have,
Before we go off the I though, so we're gonna move I to additional provisions?
I think get it out of there, yeah.
Okay.
so my other question for I was, yeah, how does typical code enforcement handle something like this with an unsafe structure? Does it automatically come to the town board or do they issue notices first? Because,
Well, it's, so you have several remedies when there's a situation like this. So you can issue a notice of violation, and a violation that's criminal. You can go to Supreme Court to, you know, have it removed. Or you can exercise an administrative remedy, and that's when you just come directly to the town board and say, this is imminent danger, we need to do something quickly, and, you know, there's 3 avenues that you could pursue to legalize.
Where would you put that, Stephen? Where would you locate
This
this?
section, to me, it's either gonna be in the, not even the penalties, I think the additional
Additional provisions.
provisions will be fine.
Let's go dogs, go. Neighbors.
The other one I had was J. With the 10 days. Is it typically 10 days or was it 30 days? How do we do the notice and the notice for the public hearing? Was it consistent?
10
That's 10 days.
minimum.
Mm-hmm. Didn't we just change one to 30, the ZBA, or was it the planning board wetlands? We changed It was wetlands to 30 days Yeah. from 10 days, right? Because we said it wasn't enough notice. So that was,
But that wasn't enough because of the neighbors.
right, and this is to notify the
Yeah.
neighbors.
I think we should make it.
Have a
I
mailing,
agree with that,
With
30
our-
days.
postal service, 30 is. Now, this is a new provision. Right. Whereas historically, there hasn't been neighbor notification on dock applications. Right. And so there was internally within the committee, if I'm remembering the meeting correctly, pushback on that. So how do we feel about that? Part of me was thinking kind of a medium, but if you're asking for a variance, then you should have to notify the neighbors, but if you're.
This is a structure,
going-
just like any other, like.
Yeah, it's like a building building permit,
Right.
like if you're within the parameters of a normal building permit, you don't notify your neighbors that you're doing
Right.
construction, you just get your building permit and proceed, it's only if you're
Yeah.
asking. for
But this
variance.
isn't, no, this isn't ministerial.
Yeah,
The town board isn't, like, the building, issuance of building permit is ministerial, right? You ABC, you get it.
Mhm.
Here, there is some discretion on the town board whether or not to grant the
There is
dock.
a public hearing
Also-
associated
It's
with it.
private.
Yeah, correct, so that's
Okay, I
why
just-
neighbors should be.
It's also
should
not.
be notified, I think, 20.
It's also not, there's a riparian rights issue, and there's also, it's actually town property. So.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm just tossing it out there because there was a little dissension within the committee, so I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I had the little note, do we do this for other permit applications? You know, like, but yeah,
Wetland
Because it is new,
special, site
yeah.
plan.
yeah.
There's a big impact to immediate neighbors, all of a sudden the dock is
Mhm, yeah,
gone.
yeah.
They should be notified.
No, and I've gotten into a little bit with people who are like, you have people who want to move their dock, they don't want it in the middle of their property, they want to push it over. And it's like, you don't want to look at it, but it's okay if you push it closer to your neighbor's property. So I do think that there should be like, but we have setbacks as well,
And
so I'm
this
just
is-
tossing
yeah.
it.
No, and also another thing to toss is what's the significance of the fact that these are public assets?
Mhm.
I mean, it's one thing when you wanna build something on your property and that you own that property, but the town owns this land where the stock is going to go.
Mhm.
And shouldn't your neighbors who have an interest in the public town asset be notified and have an opportunity to say something?
But the mere fact that it's a public hearing, it's gonna be noticed anyway. So you're just ensuring that the adjoining neighbors will have that notice to come in, because it seems silly not to take that extra step for the neighbors if you're gonna have a hearing.
All right.
The question in 10 days or 30 days?
Yeah.
I think we all are saying it should be 3 days.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean,
ZBA is what, Christine?
30.
Okay, planning board?
30.
And
No, planning board for subdivision lot lines 10, but wetlands was switched.
Right, okay, and then special and
So
site
we need to
plan.
go
Special
to-
zoning board is 30, town board is 10.
So
Town
we
board
need to,
specialist, have site plan review?
That is the same 10 for the town board.
sounds like we should look at some of these
I
plans.
think- I knew she would know.
When's my birthday?
All right,
And just go back to Meg's point on 53, 10.1A about devices. Because now, it's saying that there should be a public hearing to repair or maintain in kind and place conforming non-conforming devices or structures. Then it says here, at least 30 days prior to public hearing for existing dock alteration, modification, or new docks. So they call out docks here, and then they
No
use more
devices.
general devices.
What if I call it a device?
So we need consistency.
so we're changing.
I would say
J.
docks or structures.
No, this is something I'm gonna talk to Bill.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, you're working on A, when we get back to J, do we want 10 or 30?
30.
30.
I go 30.
30.
Okay. We may want to consider those other 10-day ones.
Yeah, we should have a look at those. Absolutely.
I'm down to fees unless somebody has something
So
before fees.
freshwater dogs.
Fees is before freshwater.
Yeah, freshwater,
Oh,
yeah,
I see,
it got
never mind,
moved.
this just moved, okay.
Yeah,
never
I was
mind.
gonna say, I didn't have anything there because it got
Yeah,
moved to a
it got
different
moved.
section.
So fees, yeah.
So 5311B, permit fees for work on commercial docks shall not be more than twice that charge for private dock permit fees. We set some dock fees recently and we didn't differentiate. Should we?
Sure.
How many commercial docks being built? When's the last time? But
Well, this is for work on a commercial dock, so that could be repairs in excess of $10,000 as well, right?
and why would you want to handcuff yourself in the code when you're setting fees by a resolution? So why would you, I would take that out
I
completely,
would just say fees will be established by the town board.
which is in A.
It's A, yeah. Okay.
That's too ambiguous. Just established by the town board, we should have something, shouldn't we?
Well, it allows you to do it via resolution.
Yeah, so and rather than having to, like, we can just do a resolution to change dock fees. Whereas if it's in the legislation,
You'd have to do a full-blown amendment.
yeah, then we have to do the public hearing and then.
We
have the
wouldn't do it
public
without
fees.
taking advice from the WMAC.
Correct, which is what we did in this last round. Yeah. Now, C, inspection fees. This is a controversial one. Inspection fees to support relevant and appropriate activities of the dock inspector shall be established by resolution of the town board. Such activities shall include, but not be limited to, inspection of construction, alteration, modification, and repair plans, progress and completion, as well as transfer of title of subject upland. Do we want to institute inspection fees? Feel
Well,
like, are we, you're in having a fee for an inspection, and then they may have to spend money to fix whatever
Well, is
is
it
pointed
done,
out.
is it done with
I
the
would
regular building
separate,
department?
I was gonna say, I would separate this out. So if you're building a new dock or doing repairs, maintenance, all that, then the inspection fee should be included in that application permitting fee. But if you're getting a inspection for a transfer of title, then that's outside of applying for a regular permit, so that should have a separate fee. You know what I mean? I feel like our fee schedule for the construction or renovations of a dock should have included inspections, because the building inspector does go and inspect.
I
They
agree
get a
with that.
CO.
I
So
agree
then
with that.
the only new thing here would be for the transfer of title, having a dock inspection upon title transfer. That, I think, would have a separate fee structure because it's outside of the current structure of, building, renovating, whatever.
Yeah, the
You know what I
inspection-
mean?
Yeah, the inspection should be included in the application. and
Right,
permit. Yeah.
Right,
Title transfer is something different.
it's something different, it's a separate action.
So I think we can get rid of C, incorporate into A, permit
Right.
fees for the construction, alteration, modification, or repair of a dock. And any inspection fees shall be established by resolution of the town board. And I don't know if you want to put upon advice of the WMSC to make sure future town boards consult with the WMAC as opposed to an honor system.
Can't hurt.
Yeah.
Because we reference in another section, so, yes.
Yeah. So then we'll have to establish a separate fee schedule if we choose to do inspections upon transfer of title. And this kind of goes back to the question of, do we want to have an updated C of O upon property transfer? And then that process should include an inspection of the dock. So that's a bigger question for the, whole process of the building department. Do you require an updated C of O on property transfer period? Which would include lots of other things on the property.
Getting back to repairs less than 10,000. You don't have a fee right now, but is there work on the building department's part or the dock inspector's part?
Well, if it's less than 10,000, they don't need a permit,
Correct.
so
So then there's no.
there's no
Right.
work.
Yeah, okay.
So then there would be no inspection. So. Do we want to include inspections upon transfer of title of subject of land?
Yes.
So we were gonna move that from C to A. And then we'd have to set up a fee schedule for that.
What's our trigger? How do we know when it's transferring?
Well, again, I think we just put in the general and any inspection fee, and then allow you to have that discussion when you're setting fees, when and if you would wanna charge a fee for an inspection.
Okay.
The trigger, I think, is when somebody's like,
When it hits the assessor's office, when there's a
No,
deed
well,
transfer, like how do you know?
yeah, I think well, I was the executor of an estate recently and I had the building department come in and do a walkthrough on the house with me, so I knew like the C of O was up to date, so it could be part of that process.
Our docs on see those.
Well, if you're transferring title to the property, like, I wanted to make sure the C of O. So it would just be like, okay, that's fine, like, you got this and this.
There's a doc normally on the C of O.
The doc should have its own CO from when it was put in,
Yeah.
unless it predates, there are some very old docs that won't have any records. And then that would be kind of establishing a benchmark for that doc.
So then in the transfer, that will come up in the title, if it's been permitted.
If it's been permitted. So there's a lot of unpermitted docs because they
C of O, if it
pre-exist.
exists, will appear,
Mhm,
and that's the trigger.
mhm. But when the building inspector's coming out to look at the property, like, oh, you've got a dock, like, we gotta do something there too.
If they're coming out to look,
Right,
and
it should
there
be
is a
included in the
CO.
Yeah, it
whole,
should be, yeah.
the whole property, like, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's like anything additional that needs to be done other than just making sure it's
I think the
part of their
only
process out there.
pothole here is if it's an old dock that does not have CFO, that's the
Right.
pothole.
Mhm.
But then, would they, right, because then they'd have to get something written up stating what the current condition is, like what they have, what is their new existing condition? Get a certificate of compliance for it stating that it,
Yeah, but the title report will even say it's pre-existing non-conforming dock,
I don't know.
theoretically.
Would you like to read about this?
They get a certificate of completion.
Right, yeah.
Well, it's,
Yeah, he can step us through that process.
So, design and construction of private and commercial docks. Now, this is the one where I read one as I. So for C1, I'm assuming this is in a channel, you have canal in the middle. I was trying to determine exactly how you work this bad boy out.
The WMAC knows how to handle
Well,
it.
they do, but I feel like as someone reading the code, trying to figure out what I'm allowed to do, it should be digestible for the layman. I mean, I think that we should be able to either have a diagram that explains it so people can understand it, or you should be able to read it and it makes sense, because this was very confusing for me. I even handed it to a couple different people and I said, read this and tell me what it means. And by the time they were done, they were like, I don't know.
And from a legal perspective, provisions can get knocked out for being unconstitutionally vague. And any vagary is held against the draftsman. So we gotta make sure it is crystal clear.
Right. Because, I mean, my note was like, can someone make a diagram explaining this? Because I'm sure it has something to do with you have to be so far from the opposing shore and yada, 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 but
It's areas like
reading
West Neck
it-
Creek.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
whole
you need to
channel
keep
that-
a channel, and I understand that, but the way it's written, it's so convoluted that I was not able to formulate a visual of how this works out in the end.
All right, I'll talk to Bill about it.
At some point there was a good visual on this, but I'm not seeing
Yeah,
I don't have it. Yeah.
so,
But the thing is, we're not really gonna have visuals in the code.
right.
So when that,
Maybe if I had a visual, I could figure out how to word it better. You know what I mean? I'm having trouble sorting the whole thing out. I tried to draw a visual based off of what I was reading. And I'm sure the WMAC understands it perfectly, but
and here's another area where I may revisit my recommendation that the other section be separated into commercial and private, but definitely in this section, design standards should be separated into commercial and private,
And maybe,
clearly.
and other, maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest that.
I had on page 11, or I guess it's 53-12D2
12D2.
for width of docks.
No, conduct me, no, that's C. Okay.
I was wondering why a commercial dock exclusive of floats, but including walkways, ramps shall be no wider than 8 feet and 8 feet. I was wondering why it shrank. Because I felt like commercial docks, you kind of want a little bit more space so that people can pass each other with carts and carrying things, or, I don't know, I wasn't sure why we're getting narrower. And I thought that a wider float was a little more stable.
Yeah, they did discuss.
That's a question for Bill. Well, I don't remember the
Yeah.
discussion on that, actually.
Skylar weighed in as well with
Yeah.
with length of carts and stuff.
I remember hearing part of it, but I can't remember what the
yeah.
real rationale was.
Yeah, but they seemed comfortable with it. But then again, if we also get in this middle kind of dock, I think it should have its own
Right.
width as well.
And then boat lifts at private docks are prohibited, so that's new.
Yeah, and I couldn't remember the rationale on that.
Yeah, neither can I, it's like.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like.
That was it.
What we're missing by not allowing the public to speak is so illuminating.
It helped. I mean, I thought that,
I sent you 3
You earned that, you earned that comment.
yes. I mean, there are some boat lifts already in existence on some of the outside waters because it got too rough,
Yeah.
but, visual. It's a visual obstruction.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
do
that's the
they ever
origin.
get, and you may know this better, do they ever get applications for people who want boat lifts just so that their boat is out of the water and they don't have to constantly clean it and like strip the bottom?
There's a pending boat lift application.
Well, the reason they exist is to keep them out of
Right.
harm's way.
Right.
And I think the point of a lot of these changes are to not have docks where there
In
are
harm's
problems.
way.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm just asking if some people apply for them just, yeah,
Speedboats, if you
Right.
hang the bottom, you just have
right.
a fiberglass high shine bottom, you want that boat elevated so it doesn't get any
So it's
stone.
a buildup on it. Okay. And then does this count for things like they have the almost like floating docks for like kayaks and such, where you like pull your kayak up onto it? You know what I'm talking about? Do we have a provision for those? Because it's not really a floating dock, but it's also not a boat lift, but it's attached to a dock.
It's really a floating dock that you just drag the boat up onto.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the ski boat thing, if you're gonna leave it in the water, just paint the bottom.
I have no way either way. I'm just saying there are certain boats you do not, because the
Right.
boat does a complete 180 and the skier goes around it. There's several of them, Ski Natique has them. And they're rented in Southwold. It's called Ski Natique, and you actually ski around with the boat as the boat does a 180 at full speed.
And why would a painted bottom
Because
not allow that?
Because of the restriction of the friction, doesn't allow that boat to actually slide over the water.
Oh, okay.
There's too much science to it for me. But it's awesome to do it, I've done it.
Does sound like fun.
It's great.
Okay, I was just wondering if there was.
Can I make one comment here? There's a size limitation for floats for private dogs, but there's nothing about commercial dogs. Shouldn't there be some kind of limitation for size of floats for commercial dogs?
We're asking him to go back
Yeah.
and break up private docks, commercial docks, and whatever the in-between one is.
Mhm.
And come back with something, because we need some consistency. Or inconsistency.
Yeah.
Where are we?
She was on I, but for J, we have a waiver provision, so I'd like to incorporate J into the waiver provision.
Okay.
Section, part of it.
What section is the waiver provision? Just so I
53-16. That provision allows the town board to grant any relief from this. So this just gives some guideposts for this particular waiver situation.
It specifically lists that structures, modifications, alterations designed to reduce the impact of wave action indicate that a location is unsuitable for the maintenance of a vessel, and therefore an exception shall not be considered due to the danger of the location poses to persons, property, and the environment. Can we have an exception to the exceptions that is eliminating the?
Exactly. Well,
So that,
that would be removed.
okay.
They'll be what, sorry?
Removed.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the town board should be able to grant waivers if they make an appropriate case for it.
Okay, that was just my exception. All right. I mean, I understand where they're going with it, but I'm like, can you actually create an exception that does not allow you to avail yourself of the potential for an exemption?
Well, is it an attempt to avoid inconsistent outcomes?
You want to go down that road? Because once you offer an exception, you're opening yourself up to future exceptions.
Inconsistent
And
outcomes.
setting a precedent for giving it an exception.
Well, it might,
I don't know.
you know, I don't know if there's a compelling reason that someone would have to allow it. I don't know. I'm just saying, if you have the blanket waiver provision already in the code, that will allow you to hear just those cases. So then I was just saying, take it out of here and put it into that section.
Right.
So the blanket ban on docks in the red triangle area, we're saying that we can override that.
That's the way the code is written, and that's how it is proposed, except for this one. Exception shall be considered in case of extreme hardship subject to the following, and it's sort of restricted the town board's ability to grant something in that particular location. But
I mean, there's always some kind of relief valve. I mean, that's what the ZBA is, you know, so sure, you can ask for it, doesn't mean it's gonna get granted.
it has to be extreme hardship.
Yeah, so,
You'd have,
yeah,
It's a-
we could, to add another layer of protection, any waiver shall be by unanimous decision of the town. So.
Ooh, I like that.
I like that.
Sections are being discussed now.
I was ready to say we're moving on to 53-13, existing docks. And C, on page 7, on my page 7, 53-10, permit applications, we're saying no permit shall be required for repair of an existing dock when it's less than 50% of the original structure's supporting members such as pilings and framings remain in a structurally sound condition is determined by the dock inspector. And then here, we're saying the following are exempt from the design structures, any repairs of docks, damaged or destroyed. Like, is this redundant? Like, we've already said they don't need to come for a permit application. Well, that's when it doesn't exceed 10,000 and it's in kind of place.
This is just from the design standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. Design and construction.
And I just, it's,
Could ask Bill for
it
clarification.
seemed like, I don't know, I just, unless going back to 53-10, a permit shall not be required when it's doesn't exceed 10,000 and the repairs other than.
Place.
Oh, actually exceeds. Hang on a second.
Succeeds.
Yeah, now I'm like, I've got myself confused. Permit shall be required for the repair of an existing dock when less than 50%. I don't know, just take a look at that.
Almost there, almost there.
Yeah. So I'm up to 53-14.
Well, for 53-13B, upon the application for the repair, modification, or alteration of an existing dock, or prior to the transfer of title of property where a dock is located, the dock shall be inspected by the dock inspector. Do we want to somehow separate the application for the repair, modification, alteration of an existing dock inspection process from the transfer of title of property dock inspection? If we're going to do different fee schedules, and where it says in the event of a transfer of title, the owner shall make a separate application to the building department, so it doesn't go through WMAC, is it a different process? So that's why I'm thinking we need to break this out into something separate if it's going to move forward, because it's gonna need a little more definition. Yeah. It's gonna need a separate kind of process, and then what do you do in the event that there is no permit for that dock, or there, it predates permitting, and how do you then certify what's existing? Because that's what they would end up having to do. So it needs like a separate.
And that's where that fee comes in. Yes, okay. Are we done? Yeah, on 13. So 14. 14, under B. Pre-existing, non-permitted, and non-conforming structures existing as of June 30th, 2020 are exempt from the standards. Why this date?
Do we have any docks in freshwater body? I mean, Fresh Pond is really.
They have a little bit small.
Yeah.
Lily Pond.
Lily Pond has, you're right, they have that little, okay.
But did anyone, did you guys remember why they picked that date? I don't remember this getting discussed in the meetings, but.
Well,
Didn't understand the relevance of it. Like,
Well,
I think 2020 was the last time the code was
Updated. Amended.
revised. Yes.
So for A,
so Stephen, if you could just ask Bill when you meet.
Yeah, and then,
going back up to A.
Okay.
Just no fixed dock, float, ramp, platform, or other structure shall be constructed upon any body of fresh water owned by the town of Shelter Island, and no permit shall be issued for any such construction. So if we want to do a fresh pond remediation project, and that requires a pier, we've now made it so that we are not allowed to get a waiver from ourselves. Or we have to apply for a waiver in order to do that. Because
Well,
it's
it's a
saying,
temporary dock, right?
It is gonna be a temporary, but it could be temporary for 10 years.
right, it's,
So-
you know, I mean, how temporary is a decade,
yeah, get a waiver.
right? So that would be the process, we have to get a waiver.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we have the ability to
Yeah.
remediate fresh pond, and this isn't just like, no. Okay.
And it just, the verbiage I gotta clean up here, because it says pre-existing in B, non-permitted and non-conforming structures existing as June 30th, 2020 are exempt from the standards set forth in A. There are
Right,
no standards, it's a prohibition.
right.
Mhm.
So I think it's
On the
just saying that
prohibition.
it's allowed to exist.
Yeah.
It's allowed to maintain its existence and be repaired in place in kind.
Okay.
This is just kind of standard end of legislation language.
So it just looked like 53-17.1, limitations on water-related structures and freshwater bodies is redundant.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. I didn't, it's of no purpose.
Right.
Just realized, I think I read the wrong section. And then B had that June 30th, 2020
Yeah.
mystery date.
So you're saying 53-17.1 should be absorbed into the previous one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's already kind of,
Just expand docks to include those structures?
Yes. So it can be limitation on freshwater docks and devices.
and then the other question I had for that, yeah, there's a weird, so here, any structure deteriorating, so I'm back at, well, I guess it doesn't matter because it's almost copy pasted. So if you look at 53-17.1, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, B3, any structure deteriorating, damaged, or destroyed by any cause, including an act of God, where 50% or more of the original structure supporting members remain in a structurally sound condition, so long as the repairs are in kind and in place and are determined by the town board to significantly reduce the size and environmental impact of the original structure. If you're replacing in kind in place, you're not reducing anything. So this is saying that it has to be a reduction by using the and. So am I missing something or am I reading this?
I took the kind out because you might be able to use better lumber or whatever,
Well, yeah,
and like spacing.
want to do I mean, because I can see how you can make it more environmentally friendly by using an open grate instead of planking and by using non-treated lumber for the pilings, but that's not really what this is saying. This is,
Well, it would say, I mean, right now, they have a problem with somebody repaired a dock. They use treated lumber
yeah,
and they want them to fix that.
right. But this is specifically for freshwater bodies and it's making it sound like no matter what, it has to be a reduction in the size and environmental impact of the original structure, but you can replace in kind. So,
Kind of doesn't make sense.
yeah.
They talking about washboards at the meeting when they were discussing that.
Oh, Splashboard?
Yeah, in fresh water bodies, you don't really have.
Wouldn't need that.
Yeah, so it
There
doesn't
was
make
that one
sense.
dock that was fixed,
Right.
and they just did not permit it, and they, used treated lumber to do it.
So I'll just put that one on your radar.
Yes.
I mean, it actually is the same language in both sections, the 5317-1 and the 53, is it? 5314 B3, it's the same,
Yeah.
so just,
The new 15,
right.
point 5314B.
Okay. And then.
I felt like 5319, just, it starts to really get into legislative intent.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna create a new section for legislative intent at the top of this.
Right.
Should we just incorporate this up there?
Yeah.
No, well, what they're trying to do is, obviously give you the power to impose conditions, and then give you some guideposts in setting conditions, like what you should take into account. 5319.
Well, 5316, we skipped waivers.
They didn't have any questions on that.
16, hold on.
I think this should be eliminated. That's how it's.
Public hearing,
No,
that'll come at public hearing or send us.
We also, it's also part of, like the fresh pond example, if we
yeah,
wanna.
no, you need to have
go-
a waiver process.
Yeah,
But once you grant the waiver to somebody, that's the next person who wants a waiver, and you find a precedence for it, and you don't have no.
That's, there's case law out there that, you're not bound by, no, but there is, like,
You're not bound by.
on the zoning board level, case law says that future ZBAs are not bound by bad decisions in the past, so they can deviate if they deem it was a bad decision. And also, to really prevail, you would need to have the same exact situation, same exact environment to avail yourself of precedent, like be the next door neighbor, to avail yourself of that precedent. But again, even if that's the case, the zoning board or the town board for that matter, if they articulate the reason why they're not going for it, they're gonna right or wrong, then they can deviate from precedent.
Right.
I was at the hearing,
It's
where
really
I was applying for the dog on Peconic Avenue, and said you just granted the dog 2 years ago. Exact same thing, and the parents not going to grant the permit.
No, but they don't have to.
Yeah, so once you create precedent,
All right.
Stephen, you're saying in 5319, the second paragraph, in imposing restrictions or denying a permit, you want to keep that section, like I thought the previous.
I don't necessarily want to keep it or not, like, I'm just trying to articulate why they put it in there. But I could talk to Bill about it.
Yeah, because the first paragraph sort of struck me as legislative intent, but then the
Right.
second paragraph, not putting that in legislative intent.
It should just be a plain vanilla sentence that you're allowed to impose reasonable conditions and restrictions.
Which it is earlier.
Like, originally, I like the original.
Which gets to Albert's point about you don't want to give them the
Right.
reasons that we.
They kind of list
How to get around it. Yeah.
5 things that you can deny a permit.
If I address all 5 of these things.
Well, denying, like that should not be in this section anyway. Why or how a town board should deny a permit. This is a section dealing with restrictions or conditions.
Or should be worded different.
So I just think a general statement is fine.
I think that's survive.
I think that's good.
Oh my God, we're done?
Yeah.
I want more.
Oh, I like that. I think it's good. It gives, if the town board's gonna review something, it kind of gives a criteria that you can base it on.
But it also gives a criteria for the applicant making the waiver, the request.
Well, this one isn't waiver. This is again for you to
Right.
impose conditions on the dock. So restrictions, so like you can't make a commercial use on a private dock, and you know how we put those conditions, previous applications. I'll talk to, I'm not gonna totally remove it. We'll talk to Bill and see what his reasoning was.
All right. So now we can move on to board member reports, something we haven't gotten to.
How far back do you want me to go? I'm just
I
kidding.
know, I have like May 16th,
I'm
it's
only
like my
going
first,
Before meeting, guys.
my first, like highlights from the past month.
Let's set the record.
What?
Let's set the record for the length of the meeting.
Make it the longest meeting ever without Jim Colligan present. He
Yeah, I
always had
remember
the
what-
most comprehensive
Yeah,
around
what
the
did
table
Kevin
report.
tell me? I think it was like close to
2 hours.
No, it was like 4 hours, I think, so like we have to end this by 5 for Kevin or else I'm gonna get yelled at. He doesn't even quite yell, he just comes in and it's like 4 hours and I'm like looking at him like, what does that mean? And I'm like, oh.
So executive session, we're not gonna do it today,
Yes, we are.
on the legal thing.
We should if we wanna
Yeah.
put it on the agenda for Tuesday, or
Yeah.
else we have to bump it a week.
Or
We should-
We can have a special meeting
Yeah, we could.
around tomorrow.
I'm not.
Actually, it's Juneteenth and so the
Everybody's
staff,
off.
the staff will not be here.
No, that's
So it
true.
would have to be Thursday or Friday, or Monday,
Yeah, Thursday and Friday.
a legal session, just
Why
to
don't
go
we
over
just-
the secret stuff.
Let's just do it today. Let's just rip off the band, get it done.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
we'll take one.
yeah. I don't know.
We're gonna find out. It'll be an exciting adventure.
Yeah, a daughter has my car and she's gonna call violent at some point. So
We can give you a ride
I
on that.
have to like,
Yeah.
I have to figure out like, how that's all gonna go.
I mean, I've got a call, I gotta be on at 6, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, all right, so who wants to start around the table?
I
I've
don't even know
been
where
I've been adding to my pile for.
Yeah, I don't even
Come on.
know
Well,
where
I
to
mean, for the
start.
WMAC, I don't think we need the report, we just
Mhm.
spent the whole afternoon talking about it.
Yes, yes.
So
It
that's
was really
out.
back in May sometime when we last did these, right?
May 16th is what I have in my hand, the first one, because I have put
That's
them in
what I
chronological.
The housing board, not really much to report there either.
Well, I've got all the agendas from the meetings that I attended, so with highlights. So.
We've had the Lions Club, Citizen of the
All right,
Year.
I'm just gonna-
We've got You go, Amber.
I know, I'm just looking, I'm just like, now I'm trying to like really distill down, like IT meeting on May 16th. We, for CPF, we are gonna get to QR codes back up and running, so that it's, the public comes out this summer and starts walking those properties. They will be able to scan those back in the website change. They had come off, just because it was a big task to upload them in the format that they were previously in. But then Christina and Gordon came up with a workaround that is less time consuming for the staff to try and get up and running and will meet everyone's needs. Yeah, that's all. Oh, that's aside. language line. Rec department wants to get language line. So
Yeah.
that they can
Yep.
communicate with some of the public.
CAC is met.
I was gonna say WAC has had 2 meetings since we last did reports.
We've seen the fruits of their labor.
We've seen,
WMAC?
no, WAC.
Oh, WAC.
WAC. Yeah, so I mean, the biggest discussion, I think, is just the fall testing program with the health department. But you guys,
There's also,
who was, you guys were there?
Yeah.
Yesterday. Yeah. I sat in and signed checks.
Yeah.
So go with that.
all right, so WAC, the Water Advisory Committee, is working on coordinating water testing for nearshore areas like Silver Beach and the Mananac Peninsula with the Suffolk County Department of Water, essentially. So it would be Suffolk County Department of Health coming out and doing all of the testing. So there'll be more coming out on that as we try to figure out exactly how to organize it and how many tests Suffolk County can reasonably do in a designated period of time. So that's one thing that they're currently working on, so.
Well, I guess, can we ask questions?
Yeah.
I mean, we did the stuff in the center, and that, we don't own that data necessarily unless they give it to us. And before we do, and what's the thinking behind going to other neighborhoods to do saltwater intrusion testing and not going back to the center to redo that?
So-
More comprehensive view of it.
We haven't ruled out redoing the center. So it's just that these 2 areas came to us requesting this, and since we've already done something at the center, we do want to revisit the center because the testing that the county is going to do is very comprehensive. So this will just kind of broaden our coverage, but the center is not off the table. So because these are new areas, we wanted to kind of get those going because we're getting a lot of reports of saltwater intrusion, people's wells being salted. But it's all anecdotal and, you know, some people will talk about it, some people won't talk about it. So it kind of gives us a better idea of exactly how widespread the issue is and if there really is an issue. And then, you know, it kind of gives us some baseline information that the town and the residents here can kind of use to determine, is this something that each homeowner needs to address individually? Do homeowners feel like they need a more comprehensive solution for their area? It's just kind of helping us have a better understanding of what's going on in our groundwater.
Okay, I mean, I'm not
Yeah.
opposed to trying to figure out stuff for people that are impacted, but it does feel like we looked at the center and then we like are moving on to the next thing without solving the center. So is there a way to include the center in this retesting now? I mean, county
Yeah,
has
we can,
limited-
so that's the thing, the county has limited resources. So what we wanted to do is define a specific area and have them come in and try to test it within a certain time parameter. So that it's kind of all under the same kind of control, you know? Because when you're doing any kind of data collection or science, you kind of want to do it in a controlled environment. So by, you know,
Do you test,
yeah, you don't
do you
want to
test
do.
in September?
You don't want to do a
Or
test
do you
in
test
September
now
and a
for
test
water
in
level?
March. You
They're
don't want to
gonna-
do, like
they're
you
gonna
want to try
differ.
to keep them in the same kind of time frame. So by doing them in chunks and giving the county chunks of addresses, you know, that are all nearby, that allows them to sample those in a reasonable amount of time. So that was kind of the thought behind it, just to get more regular information. But the center is not off the table for retesting. But we also didn't really get a lot of response from people who live in the center, one way or the other, as to how they felt about the testing. So this
I
was
think
just
we
the
should
next
look at a
request.
project for the center, frankly. I mean, I've said that before.
Yeah.
I mean, we did testing in the center. We know there's a nitrate problem for the last 3 decades in the center. It's not like
Well,
new
and we have-
information.
We are getting requests for public water from people in the center. So, I mean, that's something to look at too. you know, are you thinking more of a wastewater solution or are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking IA systems installation. We have a nitrate problem, let's clean the nitrate.
Yeah, but
Whether it's,
town buildings putting in IA systems isn't gonna like solve the problem. It's
I'm
more
saying
comprehensive than
the
that.
center triangle.
Mhm.
There's gonna be more federal money, state money. There's the 0.125 tax levy. I would anticipate that passing in November for IA systems and wastewater plants, Western Suffolk.
It's for
What-
plants everywhere, not just Western Suffolk, but wherever they're deemed appropriate.
You should be prepared for additional funding.
Whether there's public water or not, we have to clean we have to clean our water, right? I mean, it's an opportunity. We know that there's an issue. Let's bring USGS. I mean, they're a top-flight organization. They know more about Shelter Island than most. Let them come in and characterize the issue, scope it, come up, make recommendations, and then have different companies, you know, Lisa LaCory from Fine Arts and Sciences, or Wayland from Landmarks Company in East Hampton, come in and facilitate, you know, the installations, the setbacks, the variances with the county health department. Try to do something in the center. I mean, we know we have a problem here.
It's just.
I mean, it's a big project, but if we had one in the queue, it would be more eligible for grant funding. And big funding, because it's a big project. But we
Just feels that we're moving on to the next thing without solving the first thing. So can we also, as part of this, solve the first thing? So, I mean, we need to get IA systems on track, and we're working on it. I've been having this conversation with Amber about getting IA systems for the municipal buildings, or some of them, that makes sense.
A little
Well, range for funding
Yeah.
for the center triangle people,
bit.
because there's more funding coming online.
And that's been the problem is we're held up at the county level because the counties run out of money. So our program is stalled because only emergency ones are going in because they're the only ones getting through the pipeline faster.
Right.
Once we get to November and the money starts to flow in again, then we can really push because right now we've got just a bunch of people hanging out there waiting, so it's hard to keep them moving. And so, like, yeah, we could try and like do something packaging together with funding, but
Project.
again, like, we gotta, like, the funding's gotta get in place.
And then it's gonna take a while to collect it, implement it, and distribute it. So even if, you know, the referendum passes in November, they have that renewable funding source, money probably won't start coming in until January or whenever they do their fiscal turnover. So it'll probably be about a year before they can really start to catch up on the backlog that they currently have. So, you know, I'm just saying, like, should things pass in November, it's not an instant solve.
No, but we should.
I'm not saying that, but if we have a project in the queue, it's gonna take time to develop that. But if we have it there, you're more apt to get grant funding for it.
What kind of a project are you thinking of? Like,
Yeah.
like, that's, I'm just trying to understand, like, the voluntary, you know, individual homeowners.
No, I'm talking about a project that the town would.
Like a
grant
municipal
funding.
project.
So the fire station, the police station, the justice hall, things that will be certainly outside of the facilities.
Talking about the center triangle.
So you're talking about individual homeowners? You're talking about individual
Yes,
homeowners?
the center
Because-
triangle.
Because the municipal buildings.
We're in the
there's-
center triangle, like the municipal buildings
No,
are
no, but
in the.
there's, I've got money there. Like,
Right,
that's
no,
the
but that's why I'm
1.25 million
trying
that
to
I'm
figure out
working with.
exactly what Albert's trying to target, you
Right,
know,
yeah,
like.
so I'm saying we've got the municipal money set aside for these different buildings to work on. And so that's a conversation that I'm continuing to have with the.
Let's move forward on that, but
Yes.
I'm looking at a bigger project.
So, yeah, so that on the individual side, that's what I'm trying to understand what the project is, like, that you're proposing. Like, do we, you know, like, how do we, like, okay, you 5 homeowners, like, how are you, I don't know, like, how do we get them to bundle them into a project? That's what I'm just trying to understand, what's the idea?
Have someone like USGS come in and look at it, characterize the center area, scope the work and make recommendations.
But
And then talk to firms to implement the installation of IA septic systems, variances, the well relocations, whatever. It's a big, huge
Or the
project.
residential properties.
Yeah,
With or without homeowner consent. Because what you're proposing is that now we just force all the homeowners to upgrade. But it's not making sense what you're saying, Albert, or am I misunderstanding something? I mean, because
I'm
you're
trying to
saying
understand it.
to hire
What I'm
somebody
trying to
to
do,
come
Meg,
in
I'm
and
talking
start
over you.
upgrading all the residences.
You're putting up roadblocks and I'm
I'm
saying,
not, I'm trying
let's,
to understand what you're
let's
saying.
do a project. Let's get something rolling. I mean, we have this issue in the center. We know it. We've known it for 30 years. And we could, the center triangle. Let's do something. Let's try to. It's gonna take time to put a project together. But once we have it in the queue, it's more eligible for grant funding. That's all.
Okay.
I guess my question is like, who's gonna spearhead it? Who's going to, like, who's gonna
Say
draft
Albert
it?
does it.
Yeah, help draft an
Because I don't
RFP.
understand what he's asking for.
Have, help draft an RFP, like, we need somebody to like do it, and it can't be one of us, like, so, but we.
Is
need
it
to
something
come
the
in.
capital planning and grants committee could work on?
We can go for the grant funding if we pull something like that together, but we need to know what the project is.
Well, and not for residential buildings.
Why not?
Why not?
Like, I mean,
Oh, well, let's
capital
start with,
planning,
let's start with the municipal buildings, okay? We own them, we have them, they're a problem, there's money available, and there's no program or plan in place. So
Joe-
we have an engineer who sits
Oh, no,
upstairs.
Joe's already,
No, no,
no, Joe's
it's
already been
already-
tasked.
Okay.
Yeah, I've already tasked him with that, so that when I go back to feds to say, we're not doing the one plant that we originally applied for, but luckily the legislation was written in a way that it's just municipal. The county one was written very specifically, and that's
For
why we
that
had to get
project,
back to 250. The 1.25 million is much broader, so, but we still need to just go, like, Joe's working on which buildings that make sense, what the costing would be, to be able to say, this is what we're thinking, can you bless it, so that we can proceed?
And let's
So
start with
that's-
that, if that's something we can work with Joe on, and it'd also show everyone out there that we're serious about
Yeah,
this.
and I mean, and so we have started that, like, that's starting, that's up in Joe's office, and then I get, he and I are gonna work together on that. But to your point, I'm just trying to understand how to package it into something that can then go for, and like, who's gonna spearhead it, and how do you get the players involved, and how do you, like, do we have to mandate, I'm having trouble getting from the big concept to how do
It's the
I
process.
break it down into steps, bites that we can move forward.
Well, before we jump over that, can we get Joe to come down and just give a little 5-minute talk about where we are in the process of the municipal buildings next week?
I'll see if he's ready. I'm not 100% sure, because there's just been so many different things he's been working on that.
It's just that people ask about it,
Yeah.
so if he just says, this is where we are, this is what we're doing, at least the public then knows.
I think there's a holiday tomorrow, I don't want to put it on for next week.
Okay.
I'd rather give him a
Week
week, but
after,
yeah,
whatever.
we can do that. But for your idea, why don't a couple of us sit down and brainstorm and start to try and break this down into something that we can,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay.
Because projects, I always need to break them down. That's why I have my stupid timelines that, like, this is how we're gonna get.
We'd like your timeline spreadsheet.
Okay, all right, we've got 10 minutes before I think Kevin will like. I think
do I even
ballistic.
bring up the fact that WAC is having an irrigation discussion tomorrow?
Yes.
All right,
Is it
so,
tomorrow?
no, it's Thursday.
Yeah.
So, Thursday at the library, it's that, 5 o'clock, I don't know if it's under the tent or downstairs. It's just an open dialogue about irrigation and people's ideas and, comments, concerns, recommendations for how we should move forward with irrigation. So it's at the library, on Thursday, the 20th at 5 o'clock.
That's helpful. Part of the problem is I don't think people understand what they can do and what they can't do.
Right, and it's also, what do people want to see happen, and then what is their justification for it, what is their understanding? So we can kind of see what everybody's baseline information is too, so we understand, you know, where people are coming from, how knowledgeable are people on how our aquifer works, things like that. So yeah, it's just open discussion.
I'm talking about things at the library. There's been circulating out on social media that the Shelter Island Reporter is for sale and could potentially close at the end of the year. There is a meeting tomorrow from 5 to 6:30-ish. Yep. At the library. We're going to open up just for this meeting. Maggie said that she can
I'm gonna go.
attend. And I know people out in the community who have ties into journalism and are going to be in attendance, so.
I mean, there was an article, Clancy wrote an article.
Yes,
Put
yes.
it in the
Oh, that's
paper.
right, that's right. I did see that. I saw the social media stuff on it. So just like inviting people, like, and I wanted to make sure that I can't go tomorrow, but
I can go.
I
Yeah.
can't either, sorry.
so, but it's super important because if they close at the end of the year, then we need
We need a
to,
new paper
we need a
record.
new paper record for publications and stuff like that, but also just the coverage, like
Well,
hugely
yeah,
concerned that we just won't get the coverage.
You
that-
want local community coverage, and if it goes into Suffolk Times to a section in the back,
Yes.
you're not gonna get that.
Yeah. Community Housing Board, I think, you know, everything's just stepping along, you know, working on the RFP. The designs have been selected for the 3 different properties with the 10 units. The site plans the surveys are being ordered so that the site plans can be done. So that's just stepping through. ADUs, the additional money reopened. So people who are interested can apply for this second round of funding.
Is that kind of, how's that communicated to the public?
I have not seen anything, but it's a good question.
And I should ask that in the meeting, from
Yes,
one of the liaisons.
Exactly. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I know there were 2 articles that the paper had done. So those were good and I think helped.
The WQI is met as well, right?
Yes. I did not make the last WQI. Yeah, I think I went to the EMS dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Albert, you covered the WQI meeting.
No, I wasn't at the last meeting. I wasn't able to be there.
Other than that, the 10K went off last weekend without a hitch. It was a great event.
Yes.
Congratulations, everybody who ran.
Yeah, I think there's a follow-up meeting and there was like one, but now of course I can't remember, but hopefully by the time that meeting happens, that just a.
There's still a roadblock horse thing.
Oh.
Over at the traffic circle on St. Mary's. and-
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think grab that. Okay, I think we can close the work session.
Okay.
Jan and Kim Bonstrom and LBR, and Julie Lane get the prize.
No, you get a gold star, yes, a gold star.
Oh, Claudia was here until it's a little
Yes,
while.
exactly, yeah, so. Okay, so. motion to
I make a
close?
motion, we close. Are we going to do a legal?
Yeah, we're gonna do a legal just to discuss secret stuff.
I make the motion.
So moved.
Meeting.
I
All in
mean,
favor?
second,
Aye. All right, thank you, everyone.